We have our Green candidate in Gord Kubanek.
Hi there.
Sarah Good representing the Liberal Party.
Hello.
Eric Duncan representing the Conservative Party.
Good evening, Todd.
Mario Leclerc representing the NDP Party.
Bonsoir.
Welcome, candidates, and we'll get right to it. First up is Gord. We had to draw before we started. We'll start to my left, go to the far right. When we close later this evening, we'll go reverse. Gord.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. 21 years ago, I was living a normal life. Everything was great. I'd moved to the country. I was a high school physics teacher, and a virus got me and almost killed me, and I had to stop. I had 2 years where I couldn't do much of anything except think and read, and I pondered what would happen after this, and in particular, what could I do for the future of my children. That's when I decided that trashing the planet really wasn't a great idea. So although I had been a Reform Party riding president in the 90s, I then chose to be a Green Party candidate, and I've been a Green Party candidate 6 times since that time. I also joined the Canadian Association of the Club of Rome, which is an environmental think tank, so I could understand what is really going on. Most importantly, I became a Third Order Franciscan beekeeper and a writer of children's books to keep my sanity. When I think of that, I also go now back 37 years. It was the 1988 free trade election. And John Turner, who lost the election, was prescient. He was looking ahead and saying, what are the implications, the long-term implications of the free trade deal? Perhaps we'll become over-reliant on the Americans. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened. And if John Turner was alive here today, he'd be able to say, I told you so. Now, that's why I joined the Greens. I don't want to have to say that I told you so. But there are many issues that you're going to see happening during the debate tonight. There are going to be I told you so kind of events. Events like, why is it that we have a decreasing GDP per capita when there's no recession? Why is it that we have had 0 increase in productivity in 9 out of the last 10 years? So when you go forward tonight, think about the long term and think, how can we avoid future I told you so's? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gord. Now we'll move on to Sarah Good, the Liberal candidate.
Thank you. Good evening. Je m'appelle Sarah Good. Sego, Sewagwengo, Sarah Good, Yongyats. My name's Sarah Good, and I'm proud to be your Liberal candidate for the newly expanded riding of Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry. First and foremost, I want to take this opportunity to share my vision with you. My vision for our community, for the riding of SDG, and indeed for all of Canada. I'm a longtime Cornwallian with deep family roots right here in this community. Je viens d'ici, profondément enraciné dans l'Est ontarien, où les liens familiaux et la vie communautaire s'entrelacent depuis des générations. I'm a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, and for the past 2.5 years, I've had the pleasure of serving as a councillor for the City of Cornwall. As a community leader, I've passionately advocated for affordability through vacancy taxes, dignified housing, economic development, and equity. Successfully championing initiatives to enhance recreation and culture, supporting local businesses, and bolstering environmental action. I believe in tolerance. I listen. I believe in owning up to mistakes and taking accountability, and working to rectify when things don't go according to plan. My philosophy in life has always been to leave things better than I found them. I've chosen to run for the Liberal Party of Canada because I know in my heart how important this election is. To protect our people and sustain a future where everyone from coast to coast to coast, regardless of race, color, or creed, can thrive and be safe on our streets, in our homes, and in our communities. We need all levels of government working together, including First Nations. I'm prepared to be your voice in Ottawa, proudly representing the people of SDG.
Thank you, Sarah. The next candidate up is Eric Duncan, the Conservative candidate.
Thank you, Todd. I want to thank your TV and the Cornwall Chamber of Commerce for hosting tonight, and to my fellow candidates for joining us here at the debate. I look forward to a spirited conversation about the future of our country and what we can do to make our community of SDNG an even better place to live, work, raise a family, or to retire in. For the past 5.5 years, I've been honored to serve as your Member of Parliament, and I'm asking for your support once again. I've served as a small town mayor and warden of SDNG. I'm a proud community volunteer, and I prided myself on being accessible to the community here in SDNG in every part of it. Whether it's been my constituency office that helps thousands of people every year, whether it's the hundreds of community events that I attend to keep a pulse of what you are thinking in the community on a day-by-day and week-by-week basis, or whether it's been the dozens of business visits to meet the business owners and employees to learn more about what we can do to make the federal government deliver more results for our country. The stakes in this election could not be higher. Today, the Liberals are asking for a fourth term in power after 9.5 years in office that's led millions of Canadians into financial difficulty. And I ask people to ask yourself, are you better off than you were 9 years ago? Are you safer? Is life more affordable? Are government services the same or better than they were 9 years ago after all the money printing and spending by the Liberals? And the answer I hear resoundingly in SD&G is that no. We desperately need a change here in this country. Conservatives want to restore the Canadian promise for all Canadians, that hard work gets you a great life in a beautiful house on a safe street under a proud flag. And after the lost Liberal decade, that promise is broken and we find ourselves vulnerable to the United States, to Donald Trump, and the threats that come from there. I look forward to the debate tonight about what we can do to make our country stronger, to stand on our own 2 feet and help Canadians, not just here in SD&G, but across the country.
Thank you, Eric. We'll move on now to Mario Leclerc, the New Democratic Party candidate.
Thank you, Todd. Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. First of all, I'd like to thank the Cogeco and the crew here and the Chamber of Commerce. And I'm really honored to be my colleagues here. I know it's a great commitment. It's the ultimate commitment we can do is just put up your name there, your face. And I must tell you right from the get-go that I really honor everyone here. And second, I'd like to also thank the local NDP Association to put my trust in myself. Ça fait la deuxième fois que je me présente ici. Guylaine est avec moi depuis 40 ans. J'ai 2 filles, Vicky et Myriam. J'adore faire campagne. J'adore la politique. J'adore ce qu'on va faire ce soir. Et puis, I work at the Housing Tribunal. The Housing Tribunal is neutral. It's not taking position for the tenants or the landlord or the owners. And I love that job. But if I get elected on April 28th, I move back to the riding, and I live in the West Island. And I do have a lot to offer. I want to make a distinction tonight. With all due respect, no name calling. That's not me. I'm not going to go that road. And I don't believe that's productive. And tonight, I hope I can make it, the distinction between all the policy and who you're going to vote for in the April 28th. You do have a choice. It's a clear choice. And I hope I can get your support on April 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. So again, I just want to remind the viewers, now we're going to go to questions, but I want to remind the viewers what we've explained to the candidates. Each candidate will get a question. They'll have 2 minutes to answer. Every candidate following will have 2 minutes as well. Then we'll have a minute for rebuttal. The rebuttal may be used by all candidates, or the candidate may just say, not interested in a rebuttal. It is up to the moderator, myself, if I deem that the question needs more time based on the complexity of the question. So how about we get right to it and see how our candidates stand up for you? We'll start off with Gord. You don't mind me calling your first names, or would you prefer something?
First names, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's start off with foreign policy and trade barriers. Obviously, it's front and center within our country, let alone the world. Canada's foreign policy draws or plays a crucial role in our global relations. How do you plan, and your party plan, to address trade barriers and tariffs, particularly in light of challenges in interprovincial trade and interprovincial relationships? Again, our viewers want to see, from the tariff point and the province point, how is your party and you going to address the concerns that we're all witnessing on TV daily? Gord.
I'd like to begin with interprovincial trade barriers. And I'm going to start with a personal story, because at the end of the day, politics is personal. I am a retired physics teacher, and I tried to get a part-time contract in Newfoundland last year, and I couldn't because my teaching license wasn't valid, so it didn't happen. In a similar way, my wife is my wife's a nurse, but my daughter is also a nurse. She's working in BC, and she has a license there, and she couldn't work out of the problems without getting another license. That's a significant barrier. Now, in terms of interprovincial trade, I know there's going to be a lot of talks about pipelines. I'm with the Greens, you know where I'm coming from. But not just that, as an engineer, my first job was actually in Alberta. I worked up in the northern oil industry up there, and it's really about the money in terms of the individual pipelines. The current pipeline at TMX was supposed to cost $5 billion. It ended up costing between 22 and 35 billion, depending upon who you talk to. Right now, the Energy East there's no offers on the private sector who want to do it. That should not be attached to the taxpayer, because TMX was paid for by your dollars, not by private industry. What the Greens would want for interprovincial energy is an electrical grid. Modern technology and modern movements in transportation and energy and industry and home heating and cooling is electrical. We have vast electrical resources. We Greens would say, rather than investing in pipelines, let's focus on an electrical grid, because we have massive power reserves. In terms of trade, we have to, of course, we've shown the free trade agreement, as you know, I told you about what John Turner told us 37 years ago. Here we are, not a surprise. So what we have to do is make sure that this is a great opportunity. So I'm looking at this and the Greens as this is the best thing ever, because now finally we're going to unattach ourselves from our over-reliance on the Americans. And we can diversify, we have the ability, we have products that people want. And so this can be a really great move for Canada. Europe, of course, is the first country that comes to mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gord. Let's move on to Sarah.
Thank you for the question, Todd. As we know, our economy relies on relationships with other countries, and for a very long time, we have been perhaps over-reliant on our neighbors to the south. With the changes that have come through and the threats from Donald Trump, which have now become real in terms of the tariffs that we're facing, we realize how important it is to diversify our economy and our trading relationships. We are going to work to break down these interprovincial barriers and create one economy rather than 13, so that the flow of goods between Canada will be facilitated in that way. Further to that, as we've seen in the first week and actually first days of Prime Minister Carney's time in office, we are working with now our partners in the European Union and beyond to work to develop those trading relationships in such a way that we are not facing tariffs as we are in the States. We have introduced, or we will be introducing, 25% counter tariffs on all US-made vehicles in order to counter these unjust tariffs that we are facing to our own goods. And I think when it comes down to it, the importance really lies in the diversification of our economy. When you become too reliant in one specific area, then you are liable to failure. So while we want to still maintain an amicable relationship, we realize that we need to maintain our independence as well and develop capacity within our own industries to be able to produce the goods that we need here in Canada in order to be self-reliant.
Thank you. Eric.
So I think there's two issues here. I think there's the interprovincial trade and then there's international trade, and what more we need to do to get our liquefied natural gas, our natural resources and energy out to other countries around the world. First, I want to start off by just saying, though, how ridiculous these tariffs are by Donald Trump. They are completely unnecessary, they are unwarranted, and the only thing this does is drive up the cost of living for both American and Canadian families. So to say knock it off and end the nonsense, I think would be the first thing when it comes to tariffs. Regardless, this has been a wake-up call for our country. For interprovincial trade barriers, we need to knock those down, and here's a few things that we can do. Pierre Poilievre has said that in the first 30 days of him becoming Prime Minister, we're going to bring all the premiers together on trying to knock down these barriers. We have a Canada Free Trade Agreement, Todd, that's 350 pages in size. 120 pages of that is exemptions to actually having free trade between our provinces. And there's some things we can do very easily. My family was in the trucking business for years. We can standardize trucking rules right across every province and have one national set. That would save our GDP, or add to our GDP, by $1.6 billion per year. Labor mobility, we need to address that province by province, as Gord had raised. And one of the things I think the incentive we need to do to get provinces to do this is what we call a free trade bonus, that the more interprovincial trade barriers that provinces get rid of, that adds to our GDP and growth. So we've said we're going to get, as a federal government, more tax revenue from it. We'll give the provinces that money back as a bonus for doing more trade and eliminating those barriers bit by bit. And the second point, Todd, I want to raise is doing business with more countries around the world. And I'll use liquefied natural gas. Germany, Japan, South Korea, Greece, so many countries have wanted to do business with us, and we've had Justin Trudeau, now Mark Carney, saying there's no business case for it. There was one then, and there is one now. We need to get an east-west energy corridor to get our natural resources out to Tidewater.
Thank you, Eric. Mario.
Thank you, Todd. I couldn't agree more with Gordon when he says the clean energy from east to west. The thing is so sad about is it took the trade war to realize that we have too many trade barriers and to realize that we need to diversify. 75% of our economy is based on the South. And this is really something, but in all that crisis, if that wakes up and say, hey, it's about time that we tackle this issue. We've been talking about this for decades. And unfortunately, we must use this time, this tariffs that they impose on us to improve what we can do, talk to each other, have a coordinated approach, knowing what the other party will do, get together as a community. And as far as the NDP, we're going to direct support impacted workers in steel, aluminum, and auto. We want to protect and grow union jobs, and especially with the industry that are hit with the Trump's tariff. We want to look at the Canada procurement policy. We want to give a supplier, again, prioritized building material like steel and made in Canada, and all in publicly funded infrastructure project. We want to buy Canadian, we want to buy local, and especially, I'm looking at protect the supply management for farmers and consumer in all trades negotiation. Supply management is not for sale as far as we're concerned. Steady supply and steady prices, and we must have reciprocal standard with our business partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. We're at the point now where each candidate has an opportunity to rebuttal or add or question what the other candidate may have said. Candidates?
I'll start. What I'll say about the record over the course of the last 9.5 years for the Liberals when it comes to interprovincial trade barriers, we're not seeing the results. The Liberals have had 9.5 years. They've had 3 terms in government now to address these issues. And if we ask Canadians, the situation's getting worse and not better. We've faced this threat now from Donald Trump for several months, and we're hearing a lot of talk, and we're hearing about the ideas about meetings, but specific ways we could actually knock these trade barriers down, we're not actually seeing results from the Liberals on this. So one of the things I challenge on that, this is why we need change, we need new leadership. I said a bit of a compliment, a backhanded compliment to the Liberals sometimes, is that they get an A for an announcement, for flashy, saying all the right buzzwords and saying the right thing. But when it actually comes to delivering results, they get an F for follow through. And so again, we have 120 pages of exemptions. You can ask the Liberals, name some that they've eliminated in the last couple of months. There's been very few, if any. They've had the time, they've lost some momentum, and Todd, that's why it's time for a change.
I'll rebuttal that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. And as you're aware, the Liberal government is now under new leadership with Mark Carney in place. Further to that, sometimes it takes a crisis in order to address a problem that we have known for a while in regards to interprovincial trade barriers. So the silver lining to dealing with Donald Trump is that we have been forced into this conversation to eliminate these barriers interprovincially. I think that we have a very capable leader who is willing to work with our provincial premiers, as we've seen in the coming weeks. And unfortunately, the leader of the Conservative Party doesn't appear to have been having those important conversations so that we can work towards actually eliminating those barriers.
The last Parliament session, we have 25 NDP MPs. We accomplished a lot. Medicare, dental care, 2 weeks sick days. We had so many accomplished. We helped with the CERB, Canadian Emergency Response Benefits. We pushed the Liberals to, and could you imagine if we have 50 NDP MPs? I hope you're going to vote for NDPs, right?
So what I will ask of the candidates this evening is that the rebuttal has to be associated to the question.
Okay, all right.
This is not an extra.
I'm too excited, I guess.
You're excited, and I appreciate that because we're blessed in this right and have great candidates.
I'm too excited to get more NDP MPs, right?
Fair enough. So the rebuttal has to be based according to the question. Gord, to the question.
My comment is going back to what John Turner said in '88, the whole idea of having free trade between a relatively little country and a big country is problematic in and of itself. We know what happened here to Cornwall with Domtar. My first job as an engineer was similarly in a pulp and paper industry in British Columbia. Well, it's gone as well. So free trade itself isn't free when you have really big and little. What we need is more control of our destiny. A control of this, we talk about the Energy East pipeline. We actually have a lot of oil in Newfoundland, but we don't get to ship it there. The oil companies get control it. If that oil went to New Brunswick, that would supply 2/3 of Canada's largest refinery. So we need more domestic control, movement within the country. The whole country was founded upon moving east-west. And the fact that we're going to do that again is actually a great sign. So this crisis is a positive opportunity for all of us to work together. And what I find interesting is that there's so much agreement with that, but it took a crisis to do it, and it was avoidable. And the two main parties is what got us in this situation.
Thank you, Gord. So again, as a moderator, I have this luxury of expanding the questions as the evening goes on, and I'm going to be fair across the board. But Sarah, this is going to go to you, because you alluded to the Prime Minister, or Mr. Carney, saying how vital it was to have that relationship with the President of the United States. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't one of his first trips or calls. There's a lot of Canadians out there wondering if we're going to improve the tariff situation and the economics of Canada, would that not have been a smart first call?
I don't think it would have. Frankly, we're dealing with a government within the United States that is more unstable and unpredictable than we have ever seen. I think as we're looking to expand these trade relationships to the EU and beyond, we need to focus on the partnerships that are going to align with our values and where we can trust that we're going to have a relationship that is going to be beneficial to both parties. Unfortunately, President Trump has not shown a willingness to be reasonable in his negotiations, and so I'm very supportive of the approach that Prime Minister Carney has taken.
So I did throw an extra question out there as a rebuttal to this by the Liberal candidate.
I'm going to agree with her. I thought it was great. Maybe it's because I have lots of friends and family in Europe. I know we have a relatively new free trade agreement with Europe, and I think it's about poker. They use the Trump metaphor often that life is a poker game, and it's all about making people look like you've got a lot of cards. And if he thinks we have a lot of cards, the game changes completely. And by us increasing our free trade with Europe, I think it brings more to the table when you go to Trump. So I think Carney did a good job. I'm not generally a fan, but well done.
I'd just like to bring up an opinion of mine. What President Trump is doing right now is he's trying to get concession, obviously, from our part, for the negotiation with the CUSMA, which is coming up in 2026. And by the same time, he's trying to get some money because in July, he's going to have to get the corporate tax cut. So he needs the money. So in the meantime, he's playing on the short term, until the dust settle down, then we have to put up. That's why the NDP is the program that we need to help our citizens.
Mario, do me a favor. Stick to the questions.
Okay. Yeah.
To the question,
Yeah.
I'll just say here on interprovincial trade, meetings for the sake of meetings is one thing, but I'll ask, and just the couple of answers we've heard, what concrete measures are the Liberal Party proposing that are going to address and remove interprovincial trade barriers? Yes, they're meeting with premiers, Todd, but they're actually not going and saying what they're going to do. I outlined in our answer, we're going to standardize trucking regulations, labor mobility with a Blue Seal program so that you can practice as a nurse in different provinces without issue. You can immigrate to this country, be able to take an exam and to do that. And also at the same time as well, when it comes to beer and alcohol, there's several different things that go along that we have to address. We have the free trade bonus. That's going to be a major move to get provinces to, yes, getting to actually reduce. So having these meetings, going to Europe, we said before, the liquefied natural gas that's needed around the world, how many offers did the Liberals make to go and give it to Germany, to the EU? They talk and talk and talk and have meetings. Where's the concrete measures and actual proposals? They're not there.
Thank you very much, candidates, and that's the way we hope it goes. Stick to the questions, rebuttal the questions, and we'll be fine, and we'll have you out of here in no time.
No pressure.
Next question is the economy and jobs. We'll start off with Sarah. Given the current economic challenges, including inflation, job insecurity, and the impact of the pandemic, what concrete actions will you and your government, if you form government, take to stimulate job growth, support small businesses through tax relief and/or grants, and ensure the long-term financial stability for Canadians? Additionally, how will you integrate the workforce training and education initiatives to help Canadians and small businesses adapt this evolving economic? Even I have my flaws. Economy.
Talk about a loaded question, Todd.
Well, we will expand if required.
Wonderful. So the Liberals over the past few weeks have made announcements in regards to some of the ways that they will help support training that is needed. We have a shortage of skilled trades workers, and so the Liberal government has promised that they will help subsidize trade apprenticeships by providing $8,000 per year to individuals who are participating in these apprenticeships. Further, I mentioned in the earlier question the counter tariffs that we were going to be imposing on U.S.-made vehicles. Well, all of the funds raised through that will go directly to auto workers who may be impacted by the effects of these tariffs, understanding that there are some potentially unpredictable impacts that will happen in terms of the labor force. There have also been announcements in regards to tax relief for small businesses and grants available to help support small businesses in maintaining their competitiveness compared to large corporations and industries. Now, it's important that we help Canadians while we are going through this uncertain economic time globally. We have eased the requirements and shortened the waiting time for those who may be experiencing layoffs to receive employment insurance, because we understand that, again, knowing our primary trading partner is the United States, that there will be potentially some industries where people are experiencing layoffs. We need to minimize the impact of those pains, ensure that we are training workers adequately to participate meaningfully in the workforce.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Eric.
So I want to talk about two things, taxes and trades on this topic. On taxes, we have pledged within the first 100 days of a Conservative government, we are going to do a full review of the tax code and taxation in this country. We hear over and over again, even from the Bank of Canada, that did the smash glass, and that we have a productivity and a competitiveness problem in this country. So we are promising to do a full review for a lower, fairer, simpler tax code. That's going to stimulate growth, stimulate businesses to go and make investments to get our economy going, to create jobs and create paychecks. One of the things I just want to call the Liberals out on was this job-killing capital gains tax that they introduced last year. That, as when Mark Carney was the advisor to Justin Trudeau and one of the economic advisors, thought this was going to be just a tax for the rich. And that was not the case. It impacted and would impact tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of small business owners in this country. It's their pension plan, it's their retirement. And now, sure enough, just weeks before an election, the Liberals backtrack, and now they say they don't support the very capital gains changes they brought in, because they know it is hitting small businesses and business owners at a time that they could least afford it. And of course, there's been the carbon tax the exact same way. We're going to get rid of the carbon tax. We're not going to get rid of it temporarily just before the election. The Liberals are promising to bring a carbon tax in after the election again, but not really explain what it's going to be. And we're saying this one option, there's one party that's going to end the carbon tax once and for all and for good. And for businesses on the trade side of things, we have a plan to invest in boots, not suits. And I realize the irony of me saying that as I'm wearing a suit, but we do need more trades, Todd, in this country. And we're going to have 350,000 more spaces over 5 years for apprenticeship grants, and we're going to fund training halls so we can get more young people working to build the homes and build the businesses that we desperately need to get the economic engine of this country going.
Thank you, Eric. Mario.
The NDP will expand the public transit across Canada with the goal of electrifying the transit by 2030 to cut emissions. We're going to, for the small business, we want to cap the high credit card merchant fees at a maximum of 1%. We also want to boost, I've been talking about that lately in a paper, employment insurance benefit. It's not yet what it used to be 20 years ago. We want to expand work sharing program. We want to increase the benefit from 55 to 2/3 of benefits. We want to put 50 weeks across the board, 360 hours for 12 weeks across the board again. Also, we want to give a break to taxpayer people, our citizens. We want to raise personal tax exemption to $19,500. That means that the first, now it's $15,500, I believe. So $4,000 more. You earn $4,000 more dollars tax-free in your pocket. We want to remove GST from essentials, monthly bills such as cell phone, eating. We want to double the Canada disability benefits. We want to lift senior out of poverty by increasing the guaranteed income supplement. And as the NDP has been talking about that, pushing that for decades. We want free medication for seniors with universal public pharmacare.
Thank you, Mario. Gord.
I don't know if any of you know this, but the first cell phone in the world was Canadian. BlackBerry ruled the world for decades. We could have conquered the world, but instead, we have nothing. Canada, I have a good friend in Montreal who has a small high-tech company. He tells me that Canada has the highest rate of innovation. We're huge at innovation, but we're terrible at turning those good ideas into technology, the companies that last. Nortel is another case in point in Ottawa. We need to work with the corporate sector and businesses for long-term sustainability of jobs, and we've done a terrible job at it. So we need to invest, but we have to work together, the business and the government together. Now, in part of that, I want to go way down now. Education, a lot of this question is about education. We all know that education is provincial. All that the feds can do is throw money to help the provinces do what we do. And what Sarah and what we've heard is all great. Clearly we need more, but we have a deeper problem. Right now, we used to teach some math. We used to be in the top quarter of the world in international exams. We're now at the bottom quarter of the world. There's a lot of things we've been doing, and I've mentioned it, where we've done short-term gain for long-term pain. And with low math scores among the population, you really can't do very much. Now, I'll give an example of innovation. We're all talking about going to gas and oil and how great it is. It was. When the national energy policy under Pierre would have happened, if that would have happened in the 80s, there would have been pipelines. We all know that that got shot down by Alberta. But now what we do is need to electrify. We have right now, if you're out west, you're not freaking about, not only about the cars, you're freaking about canola. Our farmer friends out there have a 100% tariff on canola. Why? Because we 100% tariffs the Chinese electric cars. They're actually cheaper, better. They make cars that are electric for cheaper than our gas cars. We're lacking in competitivity. As I heard from Duncan, and he's correct, our productivity is stagnant, and we have to work 1.4 hours for every hour of Canadians. We can change all that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gord. Here's an opportunity for you folks to have a rebuttal to each other's answers, but I would just point out that you sound a lot of great ideas, but I'm just curious how you're going to pay for it all. Anybody want a rebuttal?
I can start with that one. Can I start? Great. Pretty simple. One of the things that the Liberals promised years ago was to get rid of the subsidies for the oil industry in Alberta. And the oil industry is the richest industry in the planet. And we give them billions and billions per year for that. So if they want to make an economic case for the oil industry, great. Don't do it on the taxpayer's dime. And that's what they're doing right now. We would simply move those billions from that, and that's what would go to support especially small business, innovation, taxation, all the good things we've talked about without going in debt. Because frankly, as a green person, as an engineer, going in debt today for the today so that future generations pay is just not on. It's a typical example of short-term gain for short-term pain. So the money is there. We just move it from here to there. And would that be hard? Would people get upset? Sure. But if Duncan over here is a fan of business and private enterprise and let's not have government involvement, Duncan should be all for this and say, that's a great idea. Let's stop subsidies. Good for you, Duncan. I'm looking forward to your support.
And you know what, Gord, I appreciate that, and I think you're maybe just getting the name mixed up a little bit, but I prefer if we stick by the first name. Oh. Eric. Next.
I'll take on that from the comment from Gord there. So again, when the government gets involved in the private sector, he alluded to this earlier, the Trans Mountain Pipeline was initially supposed to cost $4 to $5 billion, and we've seen that go 5-6-fold after the government got involved. It's been absolute incompetence and a perfect example of why we need to have the private sector thrive. What we've said we're going to do is the red tape that is strangling Bill C-69, we call it the No Pipelines law that the Liberals brought in. It was deemed unconstitutional as well. Mark Carney's pledged to keep that in, which is going to continue to block projects for years to come. Ask yourself, Todd, over the last couple of years, how many natural resources and energy projects have we seen come to fruition in this country? And the answer is we've seen more get canceled than actually move ahead. So the whole point about government intervention is we can have a firm regulatory, a one-stop shop for environmental approvals. We can have pre-approved zones already done in advance to bring in that investment. And what's your point about how we pay for it? If we have a lot more natural resources projects, a lot more jobs, that's a lot more revenue to help pay for critical services.
Thank you very much. Anybody? Mario?
Thank you, Todd. You asked where we're going to find the money, where we're talking about the great project, but there's twofold to this. One is the NDP will cut the oil and the gas subsidies. This is $18 billion right there. And second, I worked for 10 years for the Canada Revenue Agency, right? I know how much the capital gain tax get preferred treatment. Like you earn income a dollar, then you get taxed for the dollar. Capital gain, sometimes it's 50%, sometimes it's 75%, sometimes 65%. And what they're talking about, both the Liberal and Conservative, they're talking about, you know, reducing this. That amounts to $17 billion. So that's 35 billion right there. So we're going to use that money to fund the project I just say. It amounted about for 10 billion. So we got 25 over.
My turn? I'll address
That's your option.
a few of these items that we've talked about here. The first one being the carbon tax. And I think what's important to recognize with that is that in order for us to develop these trading relationships and have free trade with places like the European Union, there is a requirement that we have a price on pollution, a price on carbon. So if we all together eliminate the carbon tax, as is being proposed by the Conservative government, we are potentially putting ourselves in a position where we are going to be liable to pay tariffs. That's not really going to be great for our trading relationship. Further to your point about where are we going to get the money? Who's paying for this? It's an investment. And when you invest in the education and the skills of your labor force, this is going to be a positive feedback loop, which is going to help build and support our economy. Finally, going back to the capital gains tax, currently, as it was prior, capital gains tax is taxed at 50% the marginal rate. That went up to 60% on income above $250,000. Most people are not making that much. So yes, it has been returned in order to stimulate investment.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to take a break, but I got one fast question, yes or no? Will your party eliminate the carbon tax once elected, and will we see it in disguise? Yes or no?
No.
Loaded question. No.
Yes, the carbon tax will be gone for good.
The carbon tax will be gone for individual, but not
Yes
for,
or no, Mario?
But I'd say yes and no. That's why it's no for the individual. It's yes for the individual, but yes for the commercial industrial.
All right.
Carbon
Thank
tax
you very
on.
much.
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the loaded question. You folks answering it, but there's a lot of people out there who want to know. We're going to take a break, but you're watching Your TV Chamber of Commerce debate right here on Your TV. When we go to break, we want to point out that there is one candidate not here this evening. We are following the rules of the federal rules when it comes to elections. That is that your party has to hold a seat within the House of Commons to actually be on the debate stage. And that candidate who's not here with us this evening is Carl McKinnon, who's the Libertarian. And we're going to go to break with a video from Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl McKinnon. I'm the Libertarian candidate for Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. I'm running in this election because I want to see some positive changes to the way that our Parliament operates. As you know, the Libertarian Party stands for less government. But what I'm mostly focused on is seeing less corruption, less spending, and less waste in our government. If I'm elected, I'm pledging to not take a salary. I'm pledging to introduce legislation which prevents the government from spending money on large ticket projects without public approval. Similarly, I would also like to see some legislation that prevents the government from spending money on foreign aid without public approval. And lastly, I'd like to introduce some recall legislation, something that prevents bad actors in Parliament from continuing to reoffend. Obviously, when people are allowed to keep going to the cookie jar, there's no stopping them. So without that legislation, we can't really expect people to rely on the honor system anymore. Hopefully, if you have questions or problems about any issues in Canadian government, you feel free to contact me.
Welcome back to the federal debate for Your TV and the Chamber of Commerce. I'm Todd Lalone. We're joined by the candidates for the upcoming federal election. It's been fun so far. We hope you're getting a good return out of your evening watching. First question up, we'll be going to Eric in this segment. That question is housing. With housing affordability becoming an increasingly urgent issue across Canada, what specific actions will your government take to address the housing crisis, both in terms of increasing supply and making home ownership more accessible for Canadians, especially first-time home buyers and those in high-demand areas?
Thanks, Todd, for the question. And let's frame the issue here over the course of the last 9 years with the Liberals' record. In 2015, when the Liberals came into office, the average home in Cornwall and SDNG cost $179,000. Just last year, the average was $422,000. That's a 135% increase. The housing prices have more than doubled in our region. That means the down payment went from $9,000 to $2,100. And now rent has doubled, and mortgage payment, as a matter of fact, when you take in what the interest rates are now and mortgage rates are, in many cases, the average mortgage has tripled for a family here in Cornwall and SDNG. So that's why we have this unaffordability when it comes to home ownership in Cornwall and SDNG. The Liberals, what did they do over the course of the 9 years? They spent $80 billion on their national housing strategy, and the result was that housing prices doubled in the mess that we've got in. Housing starts are actually slowing at a time when we need them to pick up. And here's the thing. The number one expense when it comes to buying a home is actually not the labor to build a home or the materials to construct a home. The most expensive part is government and taxes. So when we talk about what can the government do, it's actually get out of the way and lower the cost of home ownerships for new homes instantly. We're proposing to take the GST off of new home builds up to $1.3 million. That would save $65,000 and nearly $3,000 a year on mortgage payments. We're going to sell off 6,000 federal buildings and pieces of land so we can build more homes. And we're going to incentivize municipalities to speed up building permits, to lower development charges, and get more shovels in the ground. As a former mayor, I know a lot about that and know there's a lot that we can do. I've talked about training more skilled trades to get them working, and we're going to unlock billions of dollars in the private sector by allowing anybody who reinvests in Canada to defer the tax on capital gains to invest more in home building.
Thank you, Eric. Mario.
Thank you, Todd. The NDP has a different approach. We're going to use federal crown land to build over 100,000 rent control homes by 2035. We're going to use 2.3 million low household will get free energy saving retrofit like heat pumps, air sealing, and fresh insulation. That would create good job and save out up to $4,500 a year. We will also stop big corporation landlords from buying up affordable homes, which they've been for decades. We got to ban large corporate landlords from engaging in a predatory practice of buying, again, affordable housing. We would restrict sales to individual, non-for-profit, municipality, agency, and co-ops. That's a very different approach than the conservative and the liberal, I would say. We're going to offer the long-term, low-interest mortgage, just 0.5% over 5 years a term. It's $9,500 a year. It's a first-time home buyers. That's big, and that's going to help the first-time buyers to get in the market and hope hope that they can use that money for grocery and childcare and saving for the future. And we believe in that home because we believe that it should be for people, not for profits.
Thank you, Mario. Gord.
Excuse me. This is another example of I told you so. This problem has been decades in the making. In many ways, it goes back to 1992 when Brian Mulroney was the Prime Minister. I know I date myself, but these problems are long-standing. The federal government used to be heavily involved in programs that were particularly focused on co-housing. The government removed itself from that. About that time is when we had our crisis starting with unaffordability prices and also homelessness, and they're all related. It's how people can support each other. So it goes back a long time. Right now, and actually for the last 10 years, Canada has the, I'm going to quote this because I got to get the jargon right here. The Canada's population adjusted housing stock is the lowest in the G7. So we have the lowest housing stock per capita in the G7. It's been like that for a long time. Part of it is that it costs so much. When you hear about, from Eric about the high cost of government, there are some costs, but that's to pay for the infrastructure to make the house as well. But the fact is that the houses cost now about $400 a square foot. So any initiative must be including the fact that we have to, with our high population now, so we actually have a lot more people than we had, especially in the big cities. We need houses with co-housing, cooperative housing, which is built to scale so we can reduce that dollars per square foot cost. Now this of course is related to immigration, the next question. I'd say the fundamental driver has A, been interest rates that were too long, but B, there's been a mismatch between our immigration rate and our ability to provide the basic infrastructure like houses, like hospitals, like roads, like doctors, like nurses. There's been this mismatch where we want the economy to grow, but we haven't built the infrastructure. So we've got to play catch up with this, and the government has a significant role to do it. Think about World War II. We had the VET program. The feds put the money in to build all these VET houses. We are at that point again, so a strong federal role is now required.
Thank you, Gord. Sarah.
Thank you so much. So the Liberal government will invest in housing in a way that has not been seen since the end of World War II. We are in a housing crisis, and there is no question about that. We are going to be financing prefab builds, and as we've seen with the new housing catalog that's come out through the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, we now have pre-designed builds that can be streamlined through the approval process, which will help facilitate the building of a large number of houses. And here in SDG, we have lots of land and lots of need for housing. The plan that we have prioritizes families, not necessarily developers like that of the Conservative Party. So what we are working to do is ensure that we have a stock of housing that is going to satisfy the demand and the need, working with the private and public sector, but not relying on the private sector to try and fill that gap. By eliminating the GST for home buyers on buying homes under $1 million, we're going to help first-time home buyers enter that housing market and make it more affordable for families and individuals to be able to get safe and secure housing.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll have a rebuttal if anybody wants to chime in on this one. We want to cross. Do we see anybody?
I'll pick up just so we don't lose the opportunity. So the one thing I think it's key here, Todd, is that the answers you're hearing from the other parties is we need more government intervention, more government response. And here's the irony of this. The Liberals have a program that was supported by the NDP, the Housing Accelerator Fund. And here's the reality. Cornwall and SDNG municipalities aren't even eligible to apply for it. We talk about red tape. There's a bunch of red tape that happens right now where because the service manager for the city of Cornwall and SDNG is a city and they work together on housing, the federal government doesn't recognize that relationship. So one of the key things for years that the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus has been asking the housing minister to solve in Ottawa is simply even allow them to apply for the Liberals programs that are there, and they're being blocked, number one. But number two is we talk about the jargon, focus on families, not developers. Families buy their homes from developers. We have many here in Cornwall, small businesses that employ a dozen, 2 dozen people in some cases, some 3 or 4. Those are the people that we need to be providing support to get new homes built, not be demonizing them.
Thank you very much. I think you want to go, Sarah.
Yes, I would love to. I think it's great that you mentioned the Housing Accelerator Fund, which you're right, we didn't get the chance or the opportunity to make use of. However, as our sitting MP, I think it's important that you advocate for our riding to be able to actually access those funds. And from what I have heard, MPs under the Conservative Party have been blocked from enabling their ridings to access this funding. That being said, this program works. It is important for us to be able to continue to invest in the Housing Accelerator Fund, which allows for municipalities to have access to funding to build infrastructure, to support new developments, new suburbs, and continue to build more homes for families.
You know, houses cost a lot, but what we need to really look at is the price of the house relative to our income. And what's happened in Canada, going back to the 07 debacle in the US, is they had a correction in the housing market, so the house prices more match the the earnings that people have. People have over-invested. They now think of a house as a capital investment than a place to live, and the rest of the economy has suffered. So what we need to do is have people basically have to earn more, and there has to be a ratio. We have to correct the economy for our productivity. For more productive people can earn more. And when that turns out right now, we're in this stuck point where it's $400 a square foot. So it's not cheap without fundamental changes. But what we've got to do is get people to earn enough and stop just thinking of a house as an investment, but as a place to live. And there's laws that can be done to do that. So we can get back to a decent housing ratio. So people need more money as well. We need more investment to be more productive in the private business world. So the investment will happen there rather than investing in real estate.
Mario.
I think, Todd, what's the most important here is the NDP MP would fight back against corporations that are buying affordable house like they want. There's no end to this. That's the key for us, making sure if we have 50 NDP MPs in the House of Commons next time, then we're going to push for that for sure. I guarantee that.
I'm just going to follow up here because, as I said, this is going to go across the board based on who's going to remind me of a certain question. On this one, Sarah brings up a point. This is for Eric. Sarah mentioned that your party leader or your party leading up to the campaign sent, is it true that there was a memo sent out in regards to how you're to address the public, media, and so forth? Were you muzzled?
Not muzzled at all. Todd, you know I go on your program every month. I'm out in the community. I put newsletters and flyers and news release and Facebook videos out all the time. That's not the case whatsoever. What we're calling out here, and I find that kind of ironic here now that I'm being blamed as a local MP for the Liberal Housing Minister not allowing our community and all rural communities in the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus from even applying to their prestige program that they claim is helping. We can't even apply for it. That's just how I think broken the system is. It's been 2 years. We've called it out, the Wardens Caucus has called it out, local leaders have called it out, and we haven't even got them to say you could apply to their program. That's how the inability, that F for follow through that we talk about, is apparent right here. It's the local Conservative MP's fault that the Liberal government blocks rural municipalities from even being able to apply. We're able to speak freely and advocate for. All I'm saying for is let our community apply for a fair share. But more importantly, Todd, I think the better answer, as opposed to giving the large chunks to municipalities, take the GST off of new home builds and give the money directly to families.
Thank you, Eric. Any further comments on that question?
I think it's important to recognize that the information that we received as a Cornwall City Council was that we did apply for that funding and were denied. So if the fact is that we were ineligible, I think it's important that other levels of government communicate that and communicate that fact with us.
Thank you very much. Is that it, candidates?
I would just like to make a case of how extreme it is. Where I am, these are personal stories. There are 2 people nearby where I live living not probably legally in trailers. And I know several other young people living in garages, and they're living in tiny houses with 2 and 3 children. So this really is a big crisis, but it took us a long time for it to get this bad. The good news once again is finally, we're going to do something. Everybody here says, well, we're going to do something. And you know, that's the good news. This is a crisis and it's taking that. But it didn't have to get this bad before we finally dealt with it.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the next question. This will be from Mario. Immigration. Canada has long relied on immigration to fuel economic growth and diversity. What is your government's plan, if elected, to strengthen Canada's immigration system, improve processing times, and ensure that immigrants are supported as they join our Canadian society, particularly those with professional qualifications that can want to contribute to our society but are refused?
Very fascinating question, Todd. Thank you so much. Canada is supposed to be a country that welcomes immigrants. There are massive backlogs as we speak, and the delay in processing has severe consequences for the family involved. Private refugee sponsorship processing time is over 3 years. 1 in 4 healthcare workers is an immigrant, making our system stronger. 1 in 5 business owners is an immigrant, again, making our economy stronger. At the end of January this year, it almost 900,000 unprocessed applicants for immigration. The Liberal government is not investing in the necessary resources needed to help get these applications processed. They've been in power since 2015, 10 years. The delay are keeping family apart. The lengthy separation is an affront to the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child, and the federal government is responsible for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Gord.
I would say our immigration rate is too focused on growth. Immigration should be to meet the needs of the country in terms of skills that we're missing. And we've basically have too many people for our infrastructure. That's not to blame the immigrants. My parents were immigrants. But the fact is we no longer have the infrastructure, whether we're talking doctors, nurses, roads, schools, houses. We just don't have it. We haven't been able to keep up. We need to put a pause and focus on smaller numbers of skilled people to meet the demands of the society. Of course, this is linked to housing, because when we have a lot of immigrants, we also need a lot of housing, which we don't have. And once again, this is us not being able to meet the needs of the people coming here. Okay, so what we need to do is take a thing, and what's happened partly that we've turned into something what's called the third world trap. And the third world trap can be evidenced by the fact that our GDP per capita is now going down. You are poorer, for sure, and while the costs of housing have gone up. And what that means is we haven't been able to keep our infrastructure growth matching our population growth. So I would say what we're seeing is a limit in a long time developing, where what we need to do is really move towards a zero population growth, zero economy. And that's a sustainable thing. So what we're thinking about the Greens is how can we have a good Canada in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? And this grow, grow, grow mantra is underlying the problem. And the evidence, we just can't do it. It's not working. So let's take a pause, get it right, make sure if people apply, they do get in, and they have the skills that we really need right now. There was a mention about 1 in 4 healthcare workers are immigration, which is wonderful, but that is really coming a lot. And I will just, because the fact that there's a lot of people in the healthcare system, and I'm going to focus on nurses who actually resign. So it turns out in BC, for example, 32% of nurses by 35 quit. In New Brunswick, it's 80% quit by 35. So it's a retention problem that we have to look at domestically.
Thank you, Gord. Sarah.
Thank you, Todd. Our immigration is important to the sustainability of our economics, and the immigrant communities bring a richness and diversity to our community and to our country. We need to focus on working to integrate people who come here with various skills and foreign credentials to be able to streamline the recognition of those credentials and recertify them in order to be able to work and integrate into our labor economy. It was mentioned earlier that even nurses and different trades who are certified within various provinces can't even necessarily move between provinces. So we do have a systemic issue that we need to look at here in order to recognize credentials across the entire Canadian economy, so that when somebody moves here from another country, they're able to fully integrate within a reasonable period of time. We need to look at the fact that we have an aging workforce. We have a shortage of skilled laborers, and there are people who come to our country eager to contribute to our economy and to the fabric of our community. What we need to do is focus on how we can use those skills and work to reduce the stress and the burden on people in industries such as healthcare, so that we can retain our workers for a longer period of time. We can support our education sector. We can support our various trades. I believe that the immigrant communities here in SDG and those across Canada are so proud to be Canadian and to contribute to the mosaic that is Canada.
Follow up? Eric.
We had a deal in this country when it came to welcoming new Canadians for generations, and there are thousands here in SD&G alone that have immigrated as either first generation, second generation, or beyond. And it was that promise that if you came into Canada, if you worked hard, there'd be a good house for you, a good job, and that health and social capacity would be there for you to support you and give you a quality of life that we enjoy in Canada, second to none around the world. And unfortunately, under the Liberals, what they did was they had broken our immigration system. They drastically increased immigration levels to unsustainable levels over just the course of the last couple of years. Now, the last couple of months, we've seen some massive backtracking on temporary foreign workers, on international students, on now capping and reducing the numbers for family sponsorships. And one of the most personal, Todd, for me was I had the honor of being part of a group of 5 sponsorship that back in 2016, 2017, we sponsored through private sponsorship a Syrian refugee family and welcomed them to Canada. Proud they're doing very well to this day here in Eastern Ontario. The Liberals have broken our immigration system so bad, the backlogs that Mario talked about and not meeting the needs as what Gord talked about, they've canceled that program. And now what we have is this absolute chaos, millions of applications and backlog. So what we've said is we're going to cap immigration levels, and we're going to reject the notion, the Liberals lately and some of the advisors that Mark Carney's brought on has talked about the century initiative of trying to increase Canada's population to 100 million by the end of the century. That is not realistic right now, and I don't think most Canadians, including new Canadians, they want that promise to be restored, that if we make a welcome and we have a new Canadian arrive here in Cornwall or any other part of the country, that we can give them, with hard work and doing the right things, a chance to own a home, get a good job, have a doctor, and have that healthcare capacity. And for the first time in Canadian history, that's all fallen apart under the current regime. That's why it's time for a change and a different approach.
Thank you, Eric. Mario.
Todd, I think I beg to differ on that, Eric, with all due respect. The issue is not to capping immigration level. There's 900,000 families, they live apart. And to us, the NDP, there's no way to put a cap on the immigration. It is as I mentioned with the figures, I mean, there's that foundation, they're the people that found the Canada. I am an immigrant myself. So, you know, the issue is not to cap immigration level, it's to address the lack of staff, which is in the last Parliament, and I would say in the last 10 years, 5-10 years. So we need to put more resources there.
Gord.
I'm in a surprising spot of disagreeing with my NDP colleague and agreeing with Eric totally. The Century Initiative in particular is a real aberration. Look it up online. This idea, but beneath that, it's not just about immigration, there just being too many people. I'll give you it's the fact that we're addicted to grow, more. The fact is we're on a finite planet. You can't grow forever. What we need to do is do everything better. We want every single Canadian to have a high quality of life, and our quality of life has been going down. There's no question about it. But the mass immigration idea that immigration is necessary for economic growth is not true. That's one path. There are many other ways to do it. But what's happened while we have more immigrants, what's happened simultaneously is our birth rate is going down. It's now only 1.2, replacements 2.1. So, and that's a sign that things aren't quite right. People who have hope have children.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, candidates. We're going to take a short break. You're watching the all candidates debate for Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, and we're going to give Sarah her rebuttal because that's my mistake. Sarah.
Thank you so much, Todd. Sorry, I was caught by surprise there. You know, I think there's a lot of great points that have been brought up. The childbirth rate is one in particular. I mean, and we'll touch on later, I'm sure, the child tax benefit and the reduced daycare rates. We talked about a cap on immigration and then on ensuring that immigrants are integrated into society and that they're filling these holes. There is no question that we have faced some challenges over the last years. Certainly there was a thing called a global pandemic, if we remember that. This caused some instability, and now we are working to rectify that. There are programs like the Temporary Foreign Worker Program that we are pulling back on because we've seen that it's now becoming unsustainable. It's no longer just used for agriculture. We're seeing people in service roles and cafes and things like this in jobs that normally we would have Canadians to fill that role, and right now they're not filling that role. So we need to work to improve our systems rather than just putting a cap on immigrants.
We'll go to the final.
Yeah, so the global pandemic was not the reason the Liberals decided to open and drastically increase the immigration levels. And I remember it was for a time they increased it because there was no number tied to it. They just wanted to have it bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And if you disagreed with that, you were demonized and called a lot of things. But the one thing I will just say, but we talk about a cap on immigration, it's not shutting down immigration to give any impression of that. All it is tying is that anybody we welcome here, we factor in the number based on a formula. The number of homes available for people to move into, the labor market and job market, and the health and social capacity that we can give them the services for a good quality of life. To be able to look at those numbers and what's available for new Canadians to come, that's not a hard or a harsh thing. That's a compassionate thing to do. That if they move here, we can look after them and allow them to live out the Canadian dream. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
And we're good candidates?
Just one more thing.
Only if it's to the question.
It is to the question.
Right.
That's why the NDP is pushing for 100,000 more, building more homes, rent control homes. That will help to deal with this issue.
Fair enough. Thank you, candidates, and my apologies for trying to take some of the candidates' airtime. And again, you are watching the All Candidates Debate on your TV, sponsored by as well with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm Todd Lalonde.
Hard to get down and go up. Oh my goodness. Oh no, they've got a... That's grueling. Oh my gosh. I was going to go. That's like, I'm getting tired. What? No, no, tell me. Oh, okay. Thank you. You need to tell me. No, it's perfect. No, it's just, it's like, no, it's hard. It's like really long. It's really brutal, eh? Stuff you're supposed to know. Oh, no, it's not. It's brutal. This is like...
Welcome back to the All Candidates Debate right here on your TV, sponsored in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm Todd Lalonde. We're going to continue with our questions for the candidates. I think it's been fun up to this point. Maybe they don't feel the same, but the truth is we're getting some good facts out, some good dialogue.
We're still here. That's good.
Yeah, we're still here, but we're getting there. The next question is for you, Gord. We're going to talk about Indigenous services.
Right.
Obviously, we're friends right here who live beside us. We're close to the city of Cornwall and our riding here.
Yep.
We want to talk about some of the issues that they face and how we could help them if your party forms government.
Right. I'm not generally a fan of Ronald Reagan, but he did say one thing: the best thing you can do for somebody is to help them have a job. I'll give you an example of what could work and does work at reservations. I go to powwows in Northern Ontario, and I really enjoy the powwows. I was with a chief one day at a power up in Northern Ontario. He said, look, we're just like everybody else. Some of us are doing great. Some of us are muddling along, and some of us have problems. So just like everybody else, we all need to help each other. They're people just like us. In particular, I just want to give you a concrete example of success and what it is about having a basis in an economic reality, in the reality of the world. There's a nation called the Pic River Nation, which is on Lake Superior. Wonderful place right by Pukasaw National Park. I've been there several times. Powwow there is great, by the way. And what they've got is they are economically self-sufficient. They generate funds because there's a large hydroelectric dam on their land, and so they get revenue from that. They've used that to invest in mining and forestry. They have a large area up there, so they invest in mining and forestry. They get a lot of money. They have even their own cable television companies there. They are economically self-sufficient. Obviously, they needed help to get there, and they have resources. On the other hand, at the other extreme is something called the Grassy Narrows. So I'm going to do a plug-in for Grassy Narrows right now, which is a reserve that I support. That's by the Dryden Mill in northwestern Ontario. And what happened there, they had a thriving economic base. They had a wonderful fishery up there. And then what happened in the 60s, mercury poison from the dried milk in there contaminated the water, contaminated the rivers, and contaminated all the people. The fishery was destroyed because who's going to buy fish full of mercury? Then what happened is now the people are full of mercury and they have to have a hospital. 90% of the residents there are contaminated with mercury. Their economic base is gone. They're not doing well. We need to help our Indigenous friends and partners just like everybody else.
Thank you, Gord. Sarah.
Thank you, Todd. There's a saying, go slow to go fast. And when it comes to rebuilding relationships with First Nations partners, it's important that we take a step back and listen to what their needs and wants are. They are demanding self-governance. Now, when we look at the challenges that are being faced, in particular in Akwesasne, a lot of what we see relates to the geography and the barriers that we have imposed upon them. Being spread between 2 provinces and 1 state poses barriers when it comes to being able to travel freely across their nation. Now, I was grateful to be able to meet with our Ontario Regional Chief not long ago to discuss some of the priorities in terms of, again, self-governance, environmental protection, and even policing their own people. In addition to that, there's a mention here around healthcare. I know that the Cornwall Community Hospital over the last couple of years has had an Indigenous Services Navigator who identifies individuals who come through the hospital coming from Akwesasne or from other First Nations. They connect them with culturally appropriate services so that they're able to access the full spectrum of the services that are available to them. It's important that we listen. We listen carefully to what is needed and don't make assumptions. When we are going to make decisions that impact First Nations, we need to consult with them. That is a must. When the border was moved onto the Cornwall side under the Harper government, as was the pole, and this provided an additional barrier to their economic prosperity, which we need to consider.
Thank you, Sarah. Eric.
I actually want to agree with something Sarah said there. That's the leadership of Ontario Regional Chief Abram Benedict, a great leader in our region that's doing great things across the province now. And I've had the opportunity to meet with him several times and always gives great advice on issues. And I want to localize this. They say all politics is local. And Sarah raised this as well a couple of times about the location of the CBSA and tolls, and this has been a personal issue that I've been passionate about. When there was the bridge closure back, I'm going to say 15 years ago, 17 years ago now, the only option at the time was to move over to the Canadian side and have the tolls relocated. That creates a physical barrier. We had to have the border reopened and it's there, but it creates a physical barrier for people going to Cornwall Island and accessing the region of Akwesasne. And so what's very frustrating is, for an example, going to the arena, people have to pay a toll or bring their passport. To go to their beautiful skate park, they've got to go through and pay a toll both there and on the way back. This is a medium to a long-term issue, and the number one solution, I believe personally, that I've been advocating for and getting some great advice from local leaders in Akwesasne is to actually relocate, perhaps to co-locate with the Americans and move the toll to that side. So if you're going to Cornwall Island, at least, you're not subject to a toll. And Todd, I'll just say this, and for those that may not be familiar or wonder why this is why this might be an important issue, it is a very important issue. Just imagine if we had a bridge with a toll going from Cornwall into Riverdale in Cornwall. We would never accept that. And here we have our neighbors. We talk about reconciliation, economic reconciliation, removing barriers. This is something here we have to have a conversation about. We have to get cooperation from American officials and leaders, but I'm more than willing to have Akwesasne take the lead, but be there side by side to see if we can rectify this. When we talk about politics being local, we talk about reconciliation. This is one of the number one things we can do, I think, to build a better relationship between SD&G, Cornwall, Akwesasne, and the region.
Thank you, Eric. Mario.
Thank you, Todd. The United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is now law in Canada. And yet, even today, many Indigenous people are living without access to drinking water, access to education, healthcare, safe and affordable housing, and without essential infrastructure and services. New Democrats know it's not enough just to make promises. We will work through a national, nation-to-nation way that respects the free, informed consent of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people to fix this relationship and rebuild trust. We'll implement the call to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We'll make historic investment in housing and help bring healthcare closer to people's community.
Thank you very much, Mario. Here's an opportunity for a rebuttal from the candidates.
I'd like to give her a go. The fact is, my friends, the Liberals and the Conservatives, have been in power a long time, well, the whole history of Canada, in fact, and this problem has been outstanding for that long. So this is, again, one of these I told you so's, and nothing has changed. What we need to move, and there was discussion about working on the Indian Act, and what we need is to really see our Indigenous friends as equals and treat them as equals by helping them get into the economy. I did some research before coming here because I didn't know anything about the local organization, but what Chief Mike Mitchell was the chief back then, he said, look, we all know the problems, and we're going to use, the federal government is going to blame the Akwesasne as their scapegoats for the movement of illicit goods. And he wrote this in 1998. There's been requests for more positive business development. They need to stand on their own 2 feet and want to, like the Pick River Nation. Our job is to get them there so they can hold their heads high and have the self-respect all Canadians deserve.
Further comments, Sarah?
I actually agree with a lot of what Eric has said in regards to moving the toll booth and making sure that we have access and they have access to the tourism required or desired, I suppose, for the skate park and arena. I know that we often visit there when they have events going on. However, what I'm missing here is the commitment from the Conservative government to work with our First Nations, Inuit, and Métis partners. When we hear things from Pierre Poilievre like compensating survivors of residential schools is not an investment that we should be making, and that First Nations and Indigenous people need to learn the meaning of hard work. I don't understand how a leader like that can show his commitment to reconciliation and what the commitment of the Conservative Party will be to actually achieving the 94 calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commitment.
Thank you, Eric.
Commission.
I think so. Several things. Pierre we have a lot of detailed policy on how we go to self-determination and self-governance, and what there's been an Ottawa knows best approach for far too long in many generations in this country. We have a lot of detail. We talked a lot about natural resources and energy projects in this country. Indigenous communities can be a major partner. They have to be a major partner to development. I think of the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario as an example. And what we talked about is revenue sharing and not having that money go through Ottawa, then Ottawa deciding to give it back to a First Nations community. It's actually having those relationships built directly with the companies and having those dollars go there for self-determination, their own budget. So we have a lot of detailed ways that we can lift First Nations communities in this country across, give them the economic reconciliation and the jobs and the revenues that they can do for self-determination and self-governance. I'll just say on the issue of the border here locally, again, it's going to take the cooperation of the Americans. It's going to be a negotiation of sorts with the Bridge Authority, but that's something I think that's long overdue.
Thank you very much, Eric. Candidates, I just want to remind you that the questions that you're receiving this evening have all been submitted. So some questions may tie into provincial, municipal, federal. I think what people are asking as well as we go through the questions is how you and your government can work with the other levels to make sure we resolve the issues that may be asked of these questions. That leads me into healthcare. And this one's for Sarah to start off. With the increasing strain on Canada's healthcare system, particularly in long-term care, and the ongoing challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic that we all lived, what specific steps will your government take to ensure Canadians have access to timely, high-quality care, including addressing the needs of our aging population? Additionally, do you support the idea of tiered health care? And that question was probably asked, and we understand how the health care works within Canada, but we do have a federal health care minister. And how do you plan to balance public health concerns with individual freedoms and rights moving forward?
Thank you for the question, Todd. I can say unequivocally no, that the Liberal government does not support a tiered health system. We need to ensure that we have equity across the healthcare system, and investing in our public health is of utmost importance. there is a difference between individual freedoms, which I believe in, and balancing the risks to society, especially, and I believe that this plays into the global pandemic, which I referenced earlier. We have a shortage of medical professionals, but not just a shortage, it's a health human resources crisis. There is such a high demand on those individuals who are working within this system that they are being burnt out and they're leaving the field altogether. So we need to work to support those individuals, not incentivize privatization towards contract nursing and the like, which ends up costing our public health care system even more than it would if we were just paying them the proper amount to begin with. So I understand, of course, that healthcare is administered by each provincial government. I think the role of the federal government is to work closely with those provincial governments to ensure that the funding they're receiving for healthcare is actually being used in the places that it is intended to be used, and that we ensure that there are not major discrepancies between what one province is able to experience in regards to the healthcare that they receive or another. And this plays back into the very first question about reducing those trade barriers and opening it up across provinces. This qualification and ensuring that across provinces we have some level of consistency and that people have access to the services they need is of utmost importance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Eric?
So I can make it very easy. Conservatives support our universal public health care system where Canadians use their health card, not a credit card, to get any service. And I think one of the things that's very important from a financial stability and sustainability perspective is we look back in my lifetime, I'm 37 years old. The only time the Canada health transfers have been cut is actually under a Liberal government. It was the Chrétien-Martin government that cut the transfers to the provinces. That's because our finances were in such difficult shape at that time. I go back of where if we had good fiscal management, one of the things we need to do is make sure we're increasing the Canada health transfer year over year. As Canadians get older, there's more demands on our healthcare system and more technologies become available that we could adapt and help save lives and extend the quality of life and length of life in Canada. The Blue Seal program I've spoke about a bit before with immigration. We need to have a standardized program like the Red Seal program for trades, a Blue Seal for those in the healthcare profession and other professional trades like engineers and so forth, where they could write an exam and be able to do this. One of the other things, Todd, that we can do, this is getting into a bit nerdy policy areas, but I will just advocate for this, is taking a look at our Canada Health Act for the roles of certain healthcare workers. I'm thinking of RNs, to be able to modernize some of those agreements to allow RNs and RPNs to take more leadership role in our healthcare system. There's some red tape and some lack of modernization that's been there that I think we need to have a conversation about in this country. And the last thing, which is, again, as Sarah mentioned, healthcare is administered provincially, but one of the things is Health Canada are the ones that approve new health technology and devices through a program. It is very backlogged, and there's a lot of frustration between companies that are trying to bring technology and new devices into Canada, but they get delayed and a back and forth after they've been peer reviewed. So there's some things, there's some life-saving technologies, there's medications, there's so forth that already have been peer reviewed and used in many other countries similar to Canada, yet are blocked. That's where we need to have some modernization.
Thank you very much. Muriel?
Thanks, Todd. I'm glad to hear that we're kind of on the same page. Universal health care for all, which is fine. And because getting the privatization there, it just led the lack of doctors and nursing across the country. Right now, as we speak, there are 6.5 million Canadians. They don't have a doctor. And nearly 4 million have diabetes, so for free. I don't want to go, I'm going outside, but anyway, because the NDP fought for it. Anyway, and 3.5 million can see a dentist because of dental care. And now we under the medical act, there's 5 principles, as has been mentioned. The provinces, the federal will oversee the Medicare Act, and the province just manage we need to make sure that the 5 principles are in place, and they are in place to enforce it, like accessibility, universality, inclusiveness, portability, and so on and so forth. We also want the NDP to include mental health care under the Canada Health Act, which is different from the other party. And right now, as we speak, we have 60% of nursing homes that are operated for profit, We like to get it more balanced in the market, in the Canadian market. And it's time for us, it's time to take profit out of the long-term care. It's about time. We took on power, interest, and won. This is what it means to fight for people, not for profits.
Thank you very much, Mario. Sarah, Gord.
Yeah. One of the things that's difficult about a question like universal health care is that we always compare ourselves to the Americans. Relative to the G20, it's a pretty barbaric society. I mean, in terms of every man for himself. Every other G7 nation has a mixed public health care. My family comes from Germany, and they've had health care for longer than any other country. They've had public health care since 1885. We only started in the 1960s, and we're having problems. They've had a mixed model. I lived in Australia for a year. My sister still lives there. They have a mixed model. There are versions of doing a mixed public health system which are civilized and aren't American, because I certainly do not want that. But I don't think that's what we're talking about, because the European countries and Australia are civilized and everybody does get health care. It's a matter of the delivery methods. And I think they were worthy of investigation to see what other countries are doing. So on top of that, in terms of that, part of it is I looked up the numbers. Our spending on healthcare is 12.5% of our GDP. It's among the highest. Once again, we're not going to compare ourselves to the Americans. They're the aberration, actually. And it's very, very high. But what we have to do is work with the problems, because as we said, the feds are not part of the healthcare equation except to top off and except to make sure it's universal. We set the rules. But what we can do is transfer best practices. I was in Alexandria last week talking with the CEO about the problems for rural and northern hospitals. And he gave an example of a recently canceled, very successful program for the provincial government to top off funding for doctors in rural and northern areas, which allowed the doctors to be paid as much as they would in an urban city, because it turns out the funding formula is you go to a rural and northern area and your salary goes down a lot. So, I mean, obviously who's going to go? So the province funded off. What the feds could do is say, there's a successful program, let's keep supporting it, the ones that work, with the cooperation of the provinces.
Thank you, Gord. Gord, before we get into the rebuttals, I just want to tie into something you said. We know healthcare is provincial. Transfer payments come from the federal government.
Yep.
Maybe you can explain to our viewers how you see that working out and why are our provinces always crying to the federal government for lack of funds?
Okay, long time. We're going to go way back to when Canada started. Sorry. Canada started a lot. The push was because of the American Civil War, and we were afraid of being invaded again like we had been in 1812. So they said, let's get together and do things. And they looked at the Civil War and said, wow, that federal government doesn't have a lot of power. It's all based upon state rights, state rights, state rights. That makes a civil war. We don't want that. We want to put the power more with the feds so we don't have a civil war. So they gave powers, they divided up and said, whatever isn't there will be federal, and the money power, the ability to get money and distribute money is with the feds, so the feds can always use their ability to have money to keep the country cohesive and together. And for example, that means why we have equalization payments, so that you can go into a hospital in a poorer province like New Brunswick and still get good quality health care. And that's what we have, and that's why the feds have the cash.
And part of your rebuttals, I'm asking again, how do you see the federal government with their transfer payments to the provinces encouraging healthcare?
Well, the 5 principles I mentioned, and we may need to make sure, you know, as a former federal public servant, it's important to have accountability, transparency, and it's daily things that you have to imply within the federal and provincial, making sure they target their goals and they reach their goals, and making sure they spend the money where they should be spending. That's basically what it comes down to.
Sarah.
Yes, absolutely. So I think in terms of the transfers from the federal government, it's important to make sure that we are at the very least sustaining the levels we have now and likely increasing those levels. It's unclear as of yet how the Conservative government plans to reduce our taxes while increasing those transfer payments, and how we're going to address the backlog in tech approvals when there's a talk about reducing the number of federal employees. I'll digress from that. Billing codes are important. We know that right now, if you're a physician, you have different billing codes that you are able to submit than, for instance, a nurse practitioner. And this opens up a problem where now nurse practitioners are charging for services that they can't bill back for unless they're operating under a physician. Another problem that needs to be solved. Looking at interoperability standards, there was a talk about technology, and as we're looking at expanded use of technology, we need to ensure that these techs can speak to one another so that we can have a universal medical record that is transferable across all of Canada.
Eric.
Part of the lack of Liberal leadership is why we're in the financial mess we're in. Spending more money is not necessarily a better result. And look at this. They've never spent more money on outside consultants and contractors the size of the federal public service, and service standards have never been worse. And I go, the more they spend, the worse it gets. So on the thing about Health Canada technology, there's a lot of things that we can do, including partnerships with other countries. This is a personal passion of mine that I've been advocating for in my voice the last while, or where it's not necessarily spending more money, it's this broken process that Health Canada seems to have on this. This also, Todd, when we talk about transfers to provinces in spending in healthcare, to plug our Conservative plan when it comes to addictions treatment. We have a crisis when it comes to the opioid epidemic in this country. We're going to create 50,000 spaces for those battling addiction to be able to go get treatment so our loved ones can come home drug-free. We've lost more people in the last 10 years than we did the entire Second World War when it comes to the opioid overdose. That needs to end.
Thank you very much, candidates, and I appreciate how close you're staying to the time limits. We appreciate that, and we're going to give you a break. You are watching the Federal Candidates Debate right here on your TV, partnered with Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce / Your TV debate right here on Your TV. I'm Todd Lalone. Again, we're joined by the candidates for the upcoming federal election. We're going to move right into the questions, and we're going to start off with Eric. And the question for you, Eric, is climate change and pipelines. Given Canada's commitment to addressing climate change, the need for responsible resource development, and the important role of Indigenous communities in these discussions, how do you plan to lower emissions moving forward, especially now that the carbon tax is no longer in place? Additionally, how will you ensure, along with your party, environmentally responsible while supporting economic development, including projects like pipelines in ways that respects both Indigenous rights and Canada's long-term sustainability goals? Wow.
Thanks, Todd. A lot in that question, unpack in 2 minutes. Wish me well here. So I want to just actually refute part of that question of where the carbon tax being a way of lowering emissions. We've had a carbon tax in the country for several years, and emissions have continued to go up every year. So it is not correlating. What the carbon tax did do was drive up emissions still and drive up the cost of living in this country. And the fact now that at least the NDP and the Liberals have come on board just before the election, and now we heard earlier they're not sure what they're going to replace it with and what form of a carbon tax after the election, says everything right there. But Todd, I want to treat this as a global issue because emissions is a global issue. Canada has a very small percentage when it comes to the amount of emissions produced around the world. And we could actually take our natural resources here and we could use our liquefied natural gas, our oil and gas. We use technology. Technology, not taxes, can be the opportunity for us. Carbon capture and storage, hydroelectric and hydro energy projects. There's tidal energy projects that try to get started in Atlantic Canada, and they walked away because they said the federal government put too much red tape and bureaucracy in the way. And so we need to get the government and get red tape. We need to have a singular approval process for having clean energy projects and energy projects. And we could take our liquefied natural gas that we do better and cleaner than anybody in the world. And here's the fact. China and India themselves, India consumes 1 billion tons of coal every year. And if you think that's bad, China uses 4.3 billion tons per year. Germany uses 250 million tons of coal. If we're able to build LNG plants, ship it to these countries, and use that instead of coal, our global emissions would go down drastically. Instead, we've had policies for the last 9.5 years from the Liberals and NDP that want to keep it in the ground, keep Canadian paychecks overseas. We're going to reverse that, create paychecks here, and help global emissions around the world.
Thank you very much, Eric. Mario.
Thank you, Todd. Climate crisis isn't coming. It's already here. I can tell you this. Fighting climate change will be top priority for me as a UMP. That's something I personally support, and I work hard to push it again in Parliament. If elected, I'll be a strong voice for climate leadership that puts people in a planet ahead of corporate profits. Climate action isn't just about the environment. It's about jobs, it's about equity, and building a secure future for everyone, for the everyday people. That's why I'll fight for you in Ottawa. Our new leader, NDP leader, Jack McSing, talk about East-West Clean Energy Network. Gordon mentioned that in his first remarks, which I supported, I wholly support. And expanding that market, not new pipelines. Although, pipelines, if they're to be accepted, they got to be rooted and must not hurt the environment, must provide good jobs, and must meet, as some of my colleagues mentioned that, Indigenous consultation requirement. We are open to project if they meet those criteria only. Improving energy security, reducing costs, facilitating the integration of renewable energy sources. That's what the East and West energy grid is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Gord.
Great. You know I'm from the Green Party. You kind of know where I'm coming from. However, there's a little finesse here because I am an engineer. I've worked in pulp and paper. I've worked in the oil fields of Alberta. So if we can have an investment in LNG, I'm all for it. So Eric is right. There's huge demand. It's relatively clean, certainly much cleaner from the tar sands. But anything with the tar sands, I'm sorry. It just doesn't work for me. It's extremely toxic. The energy return on investment, in other words, how much energy you have to put in to get out, is 5 to 1. It's the worst in the world. It is very energy intensive. It's very polluting. Right now, there's several $100 billion worth of liability to clean up the mess, and they haven't got any money at all. The oil companies don't have to put a nickel in for their mess. In the last couple of years, several $1 billion were given by the feds to clean up oil wells, because what happens is the following. The oil companies, the big guys, extract the oil just before it's dry. They sell it to some miner, and then the miners declare bankruptcy, and you, the taxpayer, have to pay for it. That's what's happening in the tar sands. LNG is a different story. It's a cleaner fuel. I would support LNG projects under the one condition. The condition is that the money that is made with high royalties, not Alberta's, because Alberta's royalties are among the lowest in the planet. We would be more like Norway, who have used the money that they have earned to reinvest, and now they're at the point that they're moving towards an electrical grid-based economy. 50% of their cars are electric because it's actually cheaper. So I would support that kind of investment, nothing with the tar sands. And the LNG projects, the math that I've read, works when you ship it through BC. So I would support that. But what we need to do more than that, I would also agree with Mario that we have to, in the long term, use this money like Norway did, because they have $1 trillion in money that they have used from the oil and they saved it all to invest in a new thing. So let's follow the lead of Norway.
Thank you, Gord. Sarah.
Thank you so much, Todd. Climate change is a real problem that we are facing, which will impact future generations. We need to get out of the mindset that environmental sustainability and economic sustainability are mutually exclusive. They are not, and we can work towards both at the same time. We are going to invest in critical minerals that will help diversify clean innovations in technology, and we've seen announcements just recently that in Ontario there's going to be a small modular reactor which will be built, which should hopefully be able to produce energy and pump it out into the grid by 2029. We are going to work to reduce the emissions in a cost-effective manner with fossil fuel industry and ensure that Indigenous participation, they are participating in equity investments and opportunities for partnerships with First Nations and Indigenous communities. We want to have energy sovereignty so that we are producing energy in a way that we are not reliant on other countries for their energy, and that we're not making these decisions without having proper consultation. There's mention of liquefied natural gas, and I'll say, not one way or the other. I think that by diversifying our energy grid, we will become stronger, and that we can do that in such a way that we are protecting our environment and continuing to invest in the natural resources that we have here in Canada.
So candidates, this is very important, but for the simple fact is climate change is not being practiced across the world, but we're seeing it strong in Canada. What do you say to those countries who aren't at the same level as we are when it comes to environmentally?
We're among the worst in the world. When Eric said that we don't pollute that much, per capita pollution, we're in the top 4. Not only that, under the Liberals, I'm afraid to say, they've walked the good talk, they signed the Paris Accord. Not only is our emissions increasing, the rate of our emissions are increasing. So the emission curve is going like this, it's going exponential. So the Liberals, like Eric says, they say the right thing. Sounds great, they don't walk the talk. They just don't do it. The fact is, Mario's also right, because everybody here has a piece of the pie. All of us have a partial truth, but the smallest part of the truth, because we're not thinking in the long haul. And what we need to do is make temporary money, but we need to electrify, because it turns out that things like electric cars, which I've had since 2016, are cheaper to operate. That's why, to go back to agriculture and business, that's why there's a 100% tariff on canola, because we put a 100% tariff on Chinese electric cars. Why? They're $10,000 or $15,000. They're cheap.
So I'm going to rephrase my comment. What I meant by the comment is we are a country that's actually putting plans in place. If we're exceeding or meeting expectations, could be challenged. If you look at the City of Cornwall, for instance, we have a climate action plan. How are we going to bring our levels to a higher, to your point? Sarah?
I'm not sure I quite understand what you changed in your question
So
here.
basically, I want to see exactly what we have to do better.
So we need to continue to work towards meeting these targets of net zero by 2050. We have signed the Paris Accord, and you're right, emissions have been increasing, but they haven't been increasing because of the carbon tax. It's a notion that is absolutely ridiculous. So what we need to recognize is that we're fighting against a push in the fossil fuel industry to keep more, consume more and more. There's a point of enoughness, and I agree with electrifying our grid. I think it's absolutely essential that we work towards that, because because if we are completely reliant on fossil fuels, we are not going to be able to combat climate change in an effective manner. So there are many different pieces to this puzzle, and you're right, I think we all bring forward valid solutions here. The point is we must be focused on combating climate change to ensure that our future generations have a planet that they can live on.
Eric?
So to clarify what I might have said earlier, the carbon tax did not increase emissions. It did it despite having a carbon tax, emissions went up. The Liberals promised if we just bring in a carbon tax and add 20 cents and eventually going up to 61 cents a litre on the price of gas, we give out these phony rebates, which they've now admitted when they're bragging about the price of gas going down because they canceled the carbon tax, that life is now more affordable. Well, that's admitting they made life unaffordable the last number of years. And again, despite the carbon tax being in place, emissions still went up, and all their promises that this would solve the problem, it did not do what it said it was going to do. It only drove up prices and created an economic challenge, which they now have admitted to weeks before the election got called, and they knew that they were in trouble. And I'll just say there's an irony for Liberals to say energy sovereignty being a goal of theirs. For the last 9.5 years, you can go and count on your fingers and on your toes the number of energy projects and natural resource projects in this country that have been scrapped or set aside or not gone ahead, or they took their investment, went to other countries. Enough is enough. They've had a chance. It's time for change and let somebody else take
Thank
the
you,
direction.
Eric. Mario?
I think one of the way to bring more seriousness about the climate change, not only action but a result, and put the elected officer on their toes, like Eric says, is to implement. It was the intention of the Liberal back when they started in 2015, the mixed proportional representation. That would put more pressure on the more so-called marginal party to act upon those issues. They could fight within the House of Commons and they pressure them. You know, that's what I would do if I would be your MP.
Well, candidates, I appreciate that because I guess I should have just asked, what would you do better? Municipal infrastructure, Mario. Local municipalities struggle with aging infrastructure and limited funding. What specific investments would your party make to help municipalities upgrade roads, transit systems, and other essential services? I paraphrase by some candidates may say, a lot of that's municipal provincial. Remember, the 3P partnerships that we currently have within our country.
Very good question, Todd. Thank you. The federal level it's the most effective tools that we have to get involved in the public transportation, reducing emission and improving quality of life. And I suspect it's long overdue. And long-term funding needed to make sustainable and equitable transit system a reality. Transportation is a public service. It's not a privilege. Folks in Cornwall and our surrounding communities are frustrated by the lack of reliable options, and I want to change that. The federal NDP has long supported permanent funding for public transit, like rail, regional buses routes, so that rural communities are no longer left out. The other kind of policy I champion, if I have the honor of representing this riding. Better transit is not just good for the environment again. It's good for equity, affordability, and equality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Gord?
Great, 3P partnerships. Thank you. I like that one. Of course, the feds have the power of the money. But one of the things about money is if we know that it can be used constructively or in a way that is just red tape. And I would say in terms of 3P partnership, lots of it is just red tape because there's an idea which I got from Eric, actually. You said all politics is local. I like that. And if we know that local municipalities have fixed costs that are going to happen, you know, your roads are going to break down, your sewage is going to break down, your bridges need to be replaced. We know that. This is not a surprise. They should have that taxation power to do that. That means the Fed's money shouldn't be used like a carrot. I believe it should be, that fraction should be given to the municipalities so they have control of their own destiny. That could be, for example, they get always a fraction of the gasoline tax, a fraction of the HST, so that they have their funding so they don't have to go betting. That's something the feds can do, even though it's clearly a provincial jurisdiction. Because that infrastructure always requires more money, the feds could empower the municipalities and say, here, you get your cut, now you're there, now you're in control and you don't have to become begging to us. That's something the Green Party would do. I think the local municipalities here in SDG would really like that.
Thank you, Gord. Sarah?
Thank you, Todd. As somebody who is currently serving on Cornwall City Council, I understand firsthand the importance of investing in municipal infrastructure. We recently were presented with our long-term asset management plan, and we are in such a deficit in terms of the required millions of dollars that we need to maintain our infrastructure. This same case is true across the counties. And so there are different programs which can be utilized, like boosting the Canada Community Building Fund, which provides flexible funding to municipalities to invest in various types of infrastructure, whether that be roads, whether that be parks and playgrounds, bridges, etc. So the flexibility for municipalities to determine where best that funding can be used, and ensuring that, again, that 3P partnership that you talked about. Sometimes we rely on the province, sometimes we rely on the feds. More often than not, we all rely upon each other. So ensuring that those partnerships are in place so that we can have reliable funding that will make its way to the municipalities when we need it, and ensuring that places like SDG don't get forgotten. We often feel like the province thinks they end at Kingston, and that's something you hear over and over again. I will be sure to advocate for municipal funding to make its way to SDG so that we can ensure that our infrastructure is safe and secure for all residents. And if I still have time here, which I think I do, I'd like to reference the fact that the leader of the Conservative Party has on record called municipal levels of government greedy, incompetent, and money hungry. And I cannot believe that the man, Eric, standing next to me, who has been a mayor, would be satisfied with that response and how that would play into the relationships that we need to have in order to ensure that all levels of government are working together.
Thank you, Sarah. Eric.
As a former mayor, I love this question. I get to go back to my municipal roots here. I'll tackle the first part here. We have a lot of large cities right now, Todd, that are not delivering on the housing starts that we need. We've had the federal government provide hundreds of millions of dollars to big cities with promises to build more homes, and the only thing they're building is more bureaucracy. We're seeing housing starts go down in many markets at a time when they need to increase. So what we're talking about is holding large cities particularly accountable by saying, we're going to provide infrastructure dollars to large cities when they permit homes. It's a win-win situation. If they're saying that housing is desperate and we're in a dire need, which these large cities are, we will reward performance when building permits are issued. It's tying results and dollars together. For smaller communities like Cornwall and SDNG and more rural ones, what we've said is we'll bonus. We're not going to cut, but we're going to bonus. That if a city of Cornwall, for example, exceeds its housing targets that we know we need in population projection for the next 7 to 8 to 10 years, we'll bonus those municipalities so they can have more money for roads, bridges, and parks. The one thing I want to focus, Todd, my comments on is a bit technical again, and all the parties will promise significant dollars for infrastructure, and that is a given, and that is there. The challenge is the operations and the technicality, and as a former mayor, that's where I feel I am of use on Parliament Hill in some of these discussions we have on infrastructure. By the time the government announces, and we've seen this with the Liberals for many years, announce something in the budget in the spring, the budget passes, they create the details of the program, they negotiate perhaps with a province to match some dollars, the applications open, the applications close, they review the applications, they announce where it goes. We're a year or 2 years into a program before a shovel's in the ground, and there's many examples locally that I've worked with mayors and councils where this is a problem. If we're going to invest in infrastructure, it's one thing. Getting it out in a timely manner, particularly now with the recession threat we've got, is more important than ever.
Thank you very much, Eric. We'll open it up now to a rebuttal, and I just want to include there in the rebuttal, if you don't mind, when we talk about funding, I think Eric alluded to as well as Sarah, we do have a lot of municipalities within this viewing area who have a wastewater and water issue and cannot afford to build new plants. Mm-hmm. Who would like to rebuttal?
Sure. Well, I mean, I suppose I can play into that question here, and we've been advocating with the province in order to get funding so that we can have a secondary water intake, because we do not have a plan if there is some kind of problem that happens with our water intake as it currently stands. I think I want to get back to something that Eric said in regards to rewarding performance. There is no concrete number of amount of funding that has been designated towards this. And I'll say, as somebody who has attended various conferences with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, never once has the Conservative leader come and engaged with municipal leaders to find ways to collaborate on these real problems that we face. So if we want to ensure we have a government that is going to work collaboratively at all levels, I don't know how we can put our trust in the Conservative leader who is currently in power.
Eric.
Because he sends former mayors to do the job that have a very good connection. I'm thinking of my friend Scott Aitchison, former mayor of Huntsville. I've served as a former mayor. I think we have about a dozen or 15 members of our Conservative caucus that have served in municipal politics. We have excellent relationships, and FCM as being one example, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, but more importantly, making it action and results oriented. The status quo right now is not working. The more the federal government, the more the Liberals are spending on housing, the more expensive it is getting. The more they are spending, the slower the starts are getting. So again, going to these FCM meetings and having these calls is one thing, but the action and the results and the record, the performance record, leaves something to be desired. We are talking about all these meetings we have all the time. We got to have meetings, we got to work together. We need to tie performance to results. If you're not performing and you're not delivering, particularly in large cities, you're not going to get infrastructure funding. And it shouldn't be that hard. They all need more housing. They all want more housing. Do what they say they're going to do, and there won't be a problem.
Further comments?
I'd like to add, I'd like to put something into there. Number one, Eric and Pierre, and I've debated with Pierre in several elections because I live in Carleton, and he's obsessed with private enterprise will solve everything. Well, I would call that the American disease. Everything is about partnership. It's everybody about working together. Good countries with high quality of life. Let's say Norway comes to mind, since I mentioned Norway. They have a lot of private-public. The fact is, the reason things aren't being built, and so Eric mentioned that housing starts are going down. That's correct. I've talked with my friends in the building industry. It's because what they would have to charge their customers to make a cent is too high. The building costs are crazy. I had a neighbor who built a new house, young guy, farmer, son of a farmer. He put aside $500,000. It cost him $800,000. And that wasn't because of red tape. That was not because of bureaucracy. They had the land already. They had the permit. That's just what it costs. So things are not going well in the construction industry. Just the private system alone can't do it.
Thank you, Eric.
No, Todd,
Muriel.
this is, we in Canada, we have at least three level of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. But when you get, your role as the MP is be representative of your constituency and leadership. And I mean, 5 years and a half, Eric, you've been on the job. And you got to wonder, I kind of agree with Sarah on this, you need to get things going. That's your role as an MP, as a leader, to make sure that you got the people around the table, and you make a system accountability, transparency, and make sure you push the new plans issue, or whatever the case may be, whether it's postal banking, whether it's any other issue. That's the role as the MP to exercise leadership.
Thank you very much, Muriel, and thank you, candidates. We're going to take a short break. You are watching the Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry debate right here on your TV, sponsored in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back to the All Candidates Debate right here on your TV, sponsorship with the Chamber of Commerce. It's getting a little long, but we got a few more questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start again. Gord, we're going to go right to you. And again, reminding the candidates these questions are all submitted. So keep that in consideration as you answer them. With the federal government issuing travel warnings for Canadians traveling to the USA, what steps will your government take to encourage Canadians to explore domestic destinations through staycations? How will you partner with municipal governments to promote local tourism and to ensure that Canadians have access to safe and affordable trade options right here within Canada?
Before I get there, I really appreciate the fact that we all are clear that this is not a federal issue, but I got to get the dig in. I've been in several elections with Pierre, and Pierre constantly said he could do things about things that were not federal issues. I'm not going to do that. What we can do as a federal government is not deal with staycation, but what we can do is see this opportunities with this totally destructive silliness south of the border to increase tourism to Canada. And that's what the feds can do. That's an international issue. We can say, wow, what a great opportunity. All those millions of people who wanted to go to the States, especially from Europe and Japan, and they're not feeling the happy space anymore when they hear all these stories about people being locked up and detained and going to jail because they're just a tourist from Germany, happened to a Canadian as well. So we have the best opportunity right now. And I think that's the whole way of seeing this disaster that's happening, is that in Chinese they say crisis is opportunity. And we've got this opportunity to make really deep changes to things which we know, as you heard, all these issues have been long-standing terms, and now we can finally deal with them properly and honestly. So what the federal government can and should do is do a major advertising blitz across the world. Come to Canada. Here we will give you a hug. We won't strip search you. We won't go through everything. We're not going to throw you in jail and think the worst of you. We're going to treat you with the respect you deserve. And that the feds can do. And I'm sure whoever is in power will do that because it's the logical, sensible thing to do. And then what we can do is build on that and make that more permanent, because we actually spend many more tourist dollars leaving the country than entering the country. And of course, we're all guilty because we all go to Florida and we all go to South Carolina because it's great. Well, we now know that's not happening. So we can use this to promote permanently foreigners coming, and then Canadians will say, hey, that's a good thing. I'd love to go to New Brunswick. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Sarah.
Thank you, Todd. You know, there's a reason why Americans tend to sew Canadian patches onto their backpacks when they travel overseas. It's because Canadians are known as being warm and welcoming people. We're not just warm and welcoming people. We have a beautiful, vast, and diverse landscape across Canada that many of us don't take the time to even explore. And it's funny that you mentioned New Brunswick, which is somewhere that I've traveled to many times, the Bay of Fundy. And we have so many of these areas across our country that are so lovely and beautiful to explore. And one of the commitments that the Liberal government has made under Mark Carney is to create 10 new marine reserves in order to protect our aquatic life. In addition, a minimum of 15 new national parks. So again, we can protect our natural environment and resources, but in order to get people to actually visit those, what are we going to do? Well, for this summer, at the very minimum, we are going to have free admission to all of our national parks. And we know as Canadians, many of us have gone camping or nowadays even glamping. And so I think this is such an excellent opportunity to encourage us to explore our own backyards, to get out into the communities that we know and love, and even here promoting Explore SDG. We can get federal grants for the St. Lawrence waterfront, for the North Dundas trails, and work with municipal partners to enhance affordable travel for each of us so that we can explore the gems that lie in our backyard. The federal government, under the leadership of Mark Carney Liberals, will ensure that Canadians have access to enjoy these beautiful, beautiful parts of Canada, and we hope that everyone will take advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah. Eric.
I want to give a shout out to start with the great job that SD&G Tourism and Cornwall Tourism did yesterday at a first annual summit where they brought folks together from across the counties in the city. Had a great presentation from Akwesasne Travel as well about the many great things that are happening in our area, and exactly this, the efforts to bring more Americans north here to Canada and encourage more Canadians to do staycations and be around home. So we talk about leadership and doing things right. I'm very proud that we have some great local tourism organizations doing exactly that. What can the federal government do? Gord alluded to this very well about advertising, and I think there's some markets that we need to aggressively advertise more in. I'm thinking of Europe right now. There's a lot of Europeans would not be interested in visiting the United States for many reasons, and this reorganization of allies and where people might want to travel. And so I think doing advertising to show the vast array of places you can visit, from BC's coast to Newfoundland, Grossmore National Park, the Cabot Trail in PEI, Algonquin Park, CN Tower in Toronto, the list goes on of the wide variety of possibilities. And we have a lot to offer here in ourselves in SD&G in Cornwall. One of the other things the federal government can play a leadership role in working with these other countries that I spoke about on is getting more direct flights. The one thing we often think about from either Ottawa International or Montreal to Trudeau Airport is that that's great to have a direct flight to London or Paris we want to visit. Sure, but it's a two-way street and two-way flight on that, where we can have folks from the United Kingdom and France have a direct flight to Montreal and Ottawa, where they're only an hour away. The more international destinations we get nonstop into Ottawa and Montreal and right across the country, the more domestic flights and options we have within the country make it a lot easier for people to afford and be able to have staycations.
Thank you, Eric. Meryl.
I think the most important issue is here a public transit fund. I think we got to make it friendly for folks in Cornwall and in the rural communities. And make it, they can afford to have the fare free. That's a long-term project. I understand that. But we are so lucky now because of the trade war. We always been seen as welcoming nation. There's no doubt about that. But our citizens are helping us. We didn't create that war, and the patriotism from the citizen are getting out there, and people are buying local, and they buy Canada. They get together in community, and this we need to bang on that. We need to create something in the community that will foster people coming over, and I have no doubt they will, because Canada has always been a nation of welcoming one. Thank you.
It's a great question. I think we're all on the same page on this one. Is there any rebuttal? I see none.
No.
All right, perfect. We'll move on to the next one. Next question is for Sarah. Coincidental, these are submitted.
Yeah, that's right.
Mark Carney has announced more government involvement in building homes. Instead of empowering the private sector, we are adding layers of government to fix the issues largely caused by government involvement. Can all candidates speak to their party's platform on how we are going to get homes built and how we're going to do it within reason and within our means?
Thanks for the question, Todd, and I know this was submitted by one of the viewers. I think it is important to distinguish between government funding projects and adding layers of red tape. When we are putting direct federal investment into housing and affordable housing, that is going to create housing that Canadians very much need at this present time. If we look back to the investments from previous governments many generations ago, we've seen how much of an impact it can have when the federal government directly invests in housing. We are facing a crisis right now that cannot be fixed by the private sector alone, and we need to be mindful of that. There's also opportunities here to create jobs. We have industries here in SDG that build modular homes, and we can work with them to ensure that they are participating in some of this plan. We're using innovative practices here. This is not just a matter of standard construction, but when you're using prefab, modular homes, pre-approved designs, you are streamlining the process, not adding more layers of red tape. In fact, this is quite the opposite. These models, and especially these new designs that have been recently put through the CMHC, will help streamline that process, reduce the time it takes to get permitted for building.
Thank you, Sarah. Eric?
Well, the Liberal record over the course of the last 9.5 years is the opposite. It is taking more money to build new homes. It is taking longer to build new homes. The CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the federal agency tasked with, and the Auditor General, the independent Auditor General, has confirmed multiple times their customer service standard and their lack of leadership when it actually comes. They have a goal of making housing affordable in Canada. What a failure. Housing costs have doubled, their service standard, and there's many frustrations, again, even among the city of Cornwall when they've tried to apply for programs, the delays and the extra costs that have come with some of the social and affordable housing the city has built. And it was delays and timelines and actually getting the job done. The question that the viewer asked is, what can the government do? Get out of the way. If we want to have housing prices and the cost, Gord mentioned how expensive it is to build homes these days. The number one cost is taxes. And that's what we can do is we could take the GST off of new home sales on up to homes up to $1.3 million. That would save $65,000 for a new home buyer just like that. It would save them thousands of dollars a year on their mortgage payments. These are instant things that can be done to lower the cost. We're encouraging our provincial partners to match on the PST portion, not just the GST, so people can save up to 6 figures. And what we can do is, when we talk about development, there's this whole idea, and I've been a mayor, and about development charges and what they are, but people get the impression development charges build the road in front of that house or that sidewalk. All of that is built and baked into a price in a subdivision agreement. Development charges have a place, but we have way too many cities, large cities in the country right now, that are abusing that and jacking up their development charge rates by 10, 15, 20% and driving the cost away. So more people are walking away from home ownership. So what can we do for the private sector? The government can't build this all themselves. There's social housing, but the private sector needs to be incentivized to lead the way.
Thank you very much, Eric. Mario?
Thank you, Todd. The NDP has a different approach on this one. We want to use federal crown land that we already own as a federal level. 100,000 rent control by 2035. 10 years from down the road. We want to use the public land acquisition fund, investing $1 billion over 5 years, right, into acquiring, again, more public land to build more rent control. We're more on the side of affordable homes, right? That's the NDP position. Also, we want to offer, as I probably mentioned that, I think, low interest rate for first-time home buyers, 0.5% over 5 years. It's a saving of $9,500 a year. And I must say, Mark Carney has no plans for renters. He won't commit to rent control. And Pierre Poilievre wants to end the crisis to speculators and investors. That's not the NDP approach.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mario. Gord?
Oh, this is a big one. This is a great question. I have an issue with empowering the private sector. That's good. They're not building because they're not making any money, and they're in it to make money. Affordable housing is a separate issue from regular housing, and the federal government has always been involved in affordable housing going back to World War II with the VET program. There was a great program in the 80s underneath Pierre Trudeau, smart guy, where they had invested in significant money, in seed money for cooperative housing, which would then now be, I would call, a version of that is called co-housing, and that was affordable, and it's still running. And the people who are there aren't renters; they are shareholders in the corporation. So they have invested; they own the place, they live there. That was stopped by Mulroney. Our affordability crisis, once again, I mentioned before, started back then. Like every other problem you've heard tonight, these are problems that have been decades in the making by underinvesting. Eric raised the point that prices have doubled. And you say, well, why have they doubled? As if it's the Liberals' fault. Well, that's pretty silly. They don't control that. What had happened is very simple. It's a version of what's called the Dutch disease. When investors look and say, what's the easiest way I can make money? Well, since the last 15 years, the easiest way you can make money in Canada is to have real estate. So why would I invest in a company and make 3 or 4% when I could invest in real estate and make 8 or 9%? So guess what? That's what everybody, little people, corporations have done. So the prices went crazy. We've underinvested in our corporations. The result is we now have the very low productivity, and we've had no growth in that area. So we're floundering in terms of our competitive levels. So what I would say to the end of this question in terms of what is our government involvement is, let's have finally a comment about the homelessness out there. The homelessness that we have is unacceptable. It's an embarrassment. I was just visiting my daughter in BC, and we got to stop that, and the feds can put the money right now to stop the
Thank
homelessness.
you, Gord. Again, we open it up for a rebuttal. There's a few comments in there. Any candidates want to go one step further? Seeing none. Mario.
I would insist that we need a stronger rent protection to stop renoviction and price gouging for renters. This is a key for the NDP.
Thank you very much.
I will disagree with that. One of the reasons that we have those problems is I'm a landlord, and basically most people don't want to be a landlord because it's so rigged against the landlord that if the renter decides not to pay for several months, there's basically nothing you can do about it. That failure for people to want to invest means there's fewer places, and therefore the price goes up and makes it even worse. So we're kind of caught in this catch-22 situation. The question is, how do we balance that? And so I don't think it's as simple as control.
Eric.
The Liberals can't have it both ways. I'm not like you're going to let Gord get away with the Liberals, trying to give the Liberals a bit of wiggle room out saying housing doubling is not their fault. Well, then why do they have a national housing strategy? Why do they have a housing accelerator fund? Why do they have a housing minister? Because they believe they have the CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, whose goal as an agency is to make housing affordable in Canada. So they claim to have all these programs and ministers and agencies going to do this. They have to own the record as well. And this isn't an Ontario problem. It isn't a PEI problem. It isn't a BC problem. It is a Canada-wide problem of housing costs doubling. That is their record. And look, a home in Kingston is nearly double the price of a home in Watertown, New York. That's after the exchange and so forth that way. We have an abundance of land in this country, Todd. There's no reason why we have such this abundance that we cannot go and build enough homes to have people to live in them. We have our own softwood lumber. We should be having more trades. And again, I'm not going to let the Liberals get away at this federally. If they have all these programs and these ministers, they need to be held accountable for their poor record.
I think the irony of blaming the Liberals for a problem when under Harper's government they sold off much of the federally owned housing that had been built in the 90s specifically to maintain affordability is slightly hypocritical. So I think we need to look at who is actually going to benefit from these reductions in GST. Are the prices of houses going to stay the same, and whose pocket is that money going to end up into? Development charges are important. You're right. The new roads that are being built are baked into the price of a new subdivision, but they are still relying on existing infrastructure, including water treatment and wastewater centers. So the Liberal government is going to, in addition to what I had already mentioned, fund home retrofits, which will help increase energy efficiency to reduce energy bills and stop price fixing on rent.
Thank you very much, candidates. That was great. We're going to take a short break. You are watching the All Candidates Debate right here on your TV. It's partnered in sponsorship with Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back to the All Candidates Debate right here on your TV. Partner, I'll get it right before this evening's done as we come along, but partnered with Chamber of Commerce. We have 2 more questions to go. We'll go to closing statements. And then the first question that I'm going to bring up is going to go to Eric. Eric, this is from a viewer, in their words. I believe our biggest issue is not how much money is given, and it's more about how efficiently the money is spent. Government contracts and budget allocation need serious improvement. What steps will you and your government take to ensure that the taxpayers' money is spent efficiently?
What a great question. I didn't write that myself, but it's a good opportunity just to talk about our fiscally conservative message here. Here's just the context. I try to keep framing it to remind our viewers. We have a $1.3 trillion debt in this country. Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney have doubled that. They've spent more money on our national debt than every other prime minister and government in Canadian history before them combined. And ask yourself, after 9 years and after those hundreds of billions of dollars in debt and spending and money printing, are we better off? And the answer is no. When you call CRA, you're on the phone for multiple hours, 2-3 hours, if you get answered at all. You send your passport in for the longest time, and it was taking months to get back. Our immigration system, millions of individuals backlogged. The list goes on and on and on, where the more they spend, the worse it has gotten the last 9.5 years. So I agree with the premise of the question, and I said it earlier, is that spending money is not a result. If that was the case, the Liberals, we'd be living in a utopia right now. Everything would be perfect based on spending money. What we're talking about as Conservatives is a common sense approach. We need to get our fiscal house in order. We were $63 billion, Todd, in debt just in 1 year before this tariff threat came along. It was a 50% increase. And remember, Mark Carney was going to become the finance minister when Justin Trudeau was going to fire Chrystia Freeland. That means he was complicit with Justin Trudeau's plans, was ready to become finance minister before the drama all fell apart. What's our Conservative solution? A dollar for dollar plan. For every new dollar of spending we propose, we're going to find a dollar of savings. They did this in the United States. Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich back in the 90s. They did this, a Democrat and a Republican, and what they were able to do was they balanced the budget, and then the rule expired, and the U.S. has never balanced the budget again. There's not a lot that I like to do in the U.S. and compare these days, but that goes back a generation where if you watch your dollars, you can balance the budget. That's exactly what we're going to do.
Thank you, Eric. Mario.
Thank you, Todd. We will allocate resources where it needs to be, our social safety nets. We want to crack down on corporations which don't pay their taxes. Ban offshoring business that don't pay the tax in Canada. We'll end up tax break and subsidies for oil and gas subsidies. The party will end a tax agreement with a country like Bermuda and close up the loopholes on corporate taxes at the public country-by-country financial report. The NDP, we say that we're losing out about $39 billion annually in unpaid taxes, corporate taxes. We got large corporations in Canada that purposely continue to avoid paying tax, their fair share, by using tax havens and other loopholes. It is wrong. We can make a profit in Canada. You should pay your taxes in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Gord.
This is really a loaded question, given what's happened south of the border. Those of you who have watched the American news know that there's this guy called Elon Musk, and he's making the federal government more efficient. What he's done is he's fired lots and lots of people, including about 30% of the staff of the Department involved with Human Health and the CDC, which controls Center for Disease Control. Turns out that the U.S. right now has a problem with the bird flu. They've had to kill over 100 million chickens because the bird flu is going rampant. They got a bunch of systems that don't work. We don't have that problem. The result is, though, that their egg prices have doubled. And in the meantime, the department that would deal with it, they're chopping them all. I don't think that's very efficient. So be careful with the word efficiency. On the other hand, the British government did a study, and what they did, surprise, surprise, is they ranked Canada's public service as the most effective globally. Who knew? I agree. I thought things were pretty bad, but it turns out they're worse everywhere else. So we're really not that bad. We need to compare ourselves to other countries, and that means not just the Americans. We always use American examples. Really, in terms of social being civilized, they're not the place to go. Let's compare ourselves with Denmark or New Zealand or some civil place where you want to go to and you're not going to get mugged or shot at. That's what we need to do. Now, on the other hand, there is an issue of can we afford to do what we're doing. The civil bureaucracy has bloated by over 30% under Justin. So I agree, there's a problem, okay? But it's not because the bureaucracy is bad or inefficient. It's too big. And it's grown exponentially. It is possible that there are people who are not as competent as they could be because it's grown too quickly. So it's not sustainable. So my thing is, things aren't as bad as they say, and don't use words like efficiency given what's happened south of the border. But it is, on the other hand, I agree that it is too large and needs to be dealt with.
Thank you, Gord. Sarah.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what Gordon just said, and I think we need to be mindful about how we use the word efficiency, especially in light of what we're seeing happening in the States, where people are being disadvantaged. They are paying more when they are promised that they will be paying less for goods. So understanding that when we are spending money, it should be an investment in our future. We cannot just be cutting taxes without looking at the long-term implications of this. So what I'm seeing is that the tax cuts proposed under Pierre Poilievre's government disproportionately favor the wealthiest Canadians. Where, in contrast, what we're seeing is under Mark Carney, the Liberal Party has reduced the lowest marginal tax rate. This means that the middle class and lower class can see up to an $825 savings per year on their taxes. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but when it comes to people's livelihoods at the end of the year when you're filing those taxes, being able to get that amount of money back is a huge difference for many families. I know that it would impact ours. Now, in contrast with some of the things that we've seen or announcements that we've seen under the Conservative Party, which have been in power for 3 years, or not in power, I apologize for that, I misspoke, but the leader has been in place for 3 years. The leader of the Liberal Party has been in place for just shy of four weeks. So let's not misconstrue the decisions that were made under the Trudeau government with those who were made under the Carney Liberal government. We have here an economist with an education and qualifications and a knowledge of our economic system that will carry us through this economic crisis, which again is global. This is not, we are not facing this alone. He will carry us through this and ensure that the money being spent is invested well.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I open it up for rebuttals, comments, candidates.
We're
Marion.
talking about corporate taxes, and we have to remember, Mark Carney has never fought for the, on the progressive side, the workers. He has always fought for the employers. This should be noted.
Eric?
I'm proud of my first answer. I'm the only one that answered the question about what steps we're going to take to make sure taxpayer money is spent efficiently. That wasn't talking about anything down in the US. That was talking about in Canada. When we talk and give a reference, it was actually two parties working together 25, 30 years ago to balance the budget, and something that was done successfully and seen on that. But all that being said, bringing it back to Canada and the Canadian point here, there is a lot of modernization that needs to happen, reviews of government. The $400 million green slush fund where Liberal insiders were incestuously giving themselves money. And here's a number that is just staggering for people to understand. When the Liberals came into office in 2015, the federal government spent $10 billion a year in consultants. They've now gone up to $21 billion a year. They've doubled how much they spend on outside contractors and consultants. That's after increasing the size of the federal public service. What we're saying is, let the public service do the work, not have a $11 billion a year increase. There's some major savings right there.
Thank you. Further rebuttal?
I think it's unfortunate that we're basically looking for a problem, just using it as a way to say the federal government is bad. That's sort of the implied message here. And I think that's an unfortunate message, especially given what we're seeing south of the border. We want a strong federal government. Do we want it bloated? No. Has it grown too much? Yes. But the sort of the name-calling thing, I think, is unfortunate. And what we need instead is to really work together. We're really at a moment of economic war. Let's not kid ourselves. This is serious stuff. There's a lot of people going to lose their job, and what we need to do now is rally together and not look for what's wrong, but look for right in each other. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gord.
Thanks, Todd. I agree with Gordon. I think this is the time that we need to work together and examine where we might not have made decisions that have worked for Canadians. I think that this government, led under the leadership of Mark Carney, will help steer us through this economic crisis in a way that will help band Canadians together. We have a choice here in this election. We have somebody who has knowledge to steer us through an economic crisis and somebody who has no such knowledge.
Mario, you're going to take our final question. You're going to start us off.
Thank you.
We are situated in a corridor right here that has become a route for both human trafficking and the smuggling of stolen cars heading to the Port of Montreal. What specific actions will your government take to strengthen public safety, increase law enforcement, and prevent these criminal activities from thriving in our communities?
Thank you, Todd. We all deserve to feel safe in our homes, in our community. The last Conservative government cut thousands of jobs, that's where it's coming from our police and border services, and cut crime prevention programs. That makes it harder to tackle organized crime and keep our neighborhood safe. Meanwhile, under the Liberal, more guns are being smuggled through our ports and across our borders. Our community are less safe, and hostile actors are seeking to undermine our election and threaten our citizens in the process. New Democrats are committed to working with communities to keep our neighborhoods safe. As a New Democrat, we will stop the rise of illegal firearms being smuggled into Canada and immediately, that's where I'm coming from, rehire 1,100 border officers that were fired by the last Conservative government. This will also us catch more guns at the border and traveling by rail, rather than being used in crime. We will expand the use of most effective, up-to-date, robust anti-theft technology. It's been mentioned in the media also, including forcing the auto sector, manufacturing sector, to make this technology universal on all new vehicles. Modernizing Canada regulation to improve the safety of vehicles that are already on the road, because that's a big issue. Everybody is aware of that. We'll establish a dedicated federal police presence at every major port and provide reliable scanning equipment to accept the container at the port. We will ensure that all major cities have dedicated hate crime unit within the local police forces. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Gord.
I got to look at my notes over here. This is a tough question. Let's look at the human trafficking. That's a very local issue. I did some research before coming, and it turned out that there's, as we've heard, quite a lot of human trafficking going on. But what I read is that it really comes down to, once again, not having the economic opportunity. So people do things like that because they're desperate. So how can we provide the economic base so locally this human trafficking doesn't accelerate? Because it turns out that 50%, what I read at least, was that 50% of the human trafficking locally is of young Indigenous girls, which is really, really sad and distressing. As for the cars, we've certainly become a hotbed for car theft in the world. We're near the top of the list, guys. Good for us. Not really doing things like we should. Once again, I did some research with the Insurance Board of Canada, and they got into some really complicated stuff way over my head. I got to admit, guys, I just couldn't follow it. But they basically said that there's an organization called the Auto Theft Transportation Export Network that deals with this. And what they basically said, that they can't keep up with the bad guys. The bad guys set up shop in some garage, and like 2 days later, they're gone again. They just haven't been able to keep up. It's certainly a big federal issue. This is what goes in and out of the countries. Mostly what you're going to hear in the news is about punishment. Punishment and jail time for people stealing is on. The provincial government is on that. They're increasing the punishment. But that's necessary, but not going to solve the problems. It has to do with our ports. Our ports clearly are not controlling what's going to go in and out. The ins and out, I can't say. Based upon my reading, that's clearly above my pay grade. But it's certainly something that is absolutely necessary. And it's not just about cars, though. It's about the fact that we don't control the borders for quarantine for foreign diseases. It's the same thing. I don't know if you follow it here, but more on that later.
Thank you, Gord. Sarah.
Thank you, Todd. So the Liberal government under Mark Carney will strengthen the criminal code, creating stricter laws for violent and organized crime. There will be harsher sentences for perpetrators of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, my apologies. There will also be an increased public protection in order to ensure that we can prosecute more drug trafficking and organized crime. It's been a long night, my apologies. There will be the hiring of an additional 1,000 RCMP officers to be able to protect Canadians and 1,000 new CBSA officers to prevent the transmission and the trafficking of drugs and vehicles and illegal goods into Canada. At the same time, the Liberal government under Mark Carney will be respecting the fact that hunting is part of many Canadian identities, and we will respect gun owners in the fact that they can use their hunting rifles in order to safely and legally hunt. So just to put that out to the side, we will be toughening laws to allow for consecutive sentencing for these illegal, for these violent and drug crimes.
Thank you, Sarah. Eric.
You would think by that answer the Liberals were in opposition asking for the opportunity to form government as if they've not been in office for the last 9.5 years. They brought in legislation that has made human trafficking and car theft much, much worse, C5 and C75. And I've spoken a lot about this, about our broken bail system in this country, Todd, where somebody can go and get arrested for stealing a car and be out on bail the next day, steal a car again and be out on bail the next day, over and over and over again. You ask any law enforcement official in SD&G in Cornwall, and they'll tell you both human trafficking and auto theft is a major issue, not just here in SD&G in Cornwall, but right across the country. Auto theft is up 147% in Ontario, and across the country up 46%. And we have to fix this revolving door of bail that allows these repeat offenders to get back out on bail after they've done enough damage and caused a public safety harm in this country. Specifically on the ports of entry that was alluded to in the question, here's a fact that Canadians need to know. After 9.5 years, in the Port of Montreal, there are only about 5 people that work to scan shipping containers from CBSA. We only scan 1% of containers coming into Canada that could have illegal firearms, could have a variety of drugs and other contraband. And we only scan 1% going out. And that's where we're having a massive hotbed of stolen cars going around the world. What Conservatives would say, and what we're going to do, is invest in state-of-the-art X-ray equipment at our ports in Vancouver, Montreal, Prince Rupert, and Halifax, and we're going to purchase 24 scanners, and we're going to hire 75 Border Force agents to secure our federal ports. The Liberals have had 9.5 years. They've dithered and they've delayed, and they've actually made it easier for people to commit crimes. We actually have the case now where you could actually steal a car, get convicted, and get house arrest, where you can play Grand Theft Auto on your couch after stealing a car. That's ridiculous.
Thank you, Eric. We'll get to the rebuttals. I know Mario's ready to go.
Thank you, Todd. I think there's been some improvement with the car theft figures, as Eric just mentioned, but it should be zero tolerance. I mean, between the CBSA, the RCMP, and the police port, I mean, it seems that the lack of coordination between these three, and it is up to the federal level, again, to make sure that they show leadership in addressing this issue, because people are really concerned, and I am myself too. This is last year, my car, where they tried to steal my car myself, right? So I didn't enjoy that experience. So we got to do something with, anyway, this is going back to leadership. Hopefully, we can get it better. But I promise you, if you elect me as the NDP MP, I will do something about this.
Thank you very much for their comments.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that both the Liberals and the Conservatives have been in power for 150 years, and the borders have been an issue the entire time. It's accelerated. It's certainly, we've now entered, I think what happened in the past, I'm a little older than most of you, is that Canada was ignored. We're this little country off to the side. We didn't know. The big operators, the big gangs out there, they just ignored us. Well, now we're a hotbed for gangs in general, whether it's cars, whether it's drugs, whether it's human trafficking, and we haven't caught up. And whether it's the Liberals or the Conservatives, they haven't caught up. Once again, the good news is we now are at a time of crisis. I think finally you, the voter, are willing to hear the good stuff, but asking the two parties that got us into this mess, I just don't think that's going to work. We need to change the rules fundamentally. And so you need to look for somebody else to do that. And that means looking for an alternative. Somebody, could be me, could be the NDP, but somebody different. Anybody who's in power too long, Eric has a point, everybody who's in power too long, it goes to their head a bit,
Thank you.
unfortunately.
Gord. Sarah.
Thanks. I'd like everyone to acknowledge the fact that under new leadership, we have a new direction for this government. And while Eric over here is opposed to having people on house arrest, we do have to acknowledge the fact that our prison system is incredibly costly. Housing somebody within the prison system is a huge burden on taxpayers versus having them on house arrest, for instance. But I want to refocus this on something around social determinants of health that we talk about often. It's the same determinants for crime. So if we can ensure that people have access to community service, they have access to housing, to food, to education, that is the systemic way that we reduce crime. There will always be this problem, as it has always existed in society. The best we can do is support our community members to prevent, especially young people, from getting sucked into these criminal rings.
Thank you, Eric.
The new direction that's out there is that they're running away from their record of the last 9.5 years, and the Liberals are being held accountable for it. They're pretending there's something they're not. They've had bills C-75, C-5. They've had numerous bills that have jeopardized our public safety and made crime worse. You look at stats, don't take my word for it. Take Stats Canada data. Violent crime is up 50%. Auto theft is up 46%, 147% in Ontario. Sexual assaults are up 75%. Human trafficking is up. The list goes on and on and on by every metric. So we talk about prevention. There's also deterrence as well. And there should be the case of where if you're a repeat violent offender, you should lose the right to have bail. Jail, not bail, for repeat violent offenders. There's a reason that crime went down under a Conservative government. That's a fact. And the fact is, crime has skyrocketed under the Liberals on their soft on crime approach, thinking there's no problem with house arrest when you steal cars multiple times. That doesn't make sense.
Thank you very much, candidates. That takes us to the end of our questions. I know it was long, but in fairness to the general public who are watching, they don't get the opportunity to throw questions at the candidates locally very often, if not often enough. Again, the leaders usually take the forefront, so we thank you for your patience this evening. And thank you for staying within the time limits. So now we'll start off with Mario. We'll go the opposite direction for the 2-minute wrap-ups.
Thank you, Todd. In the last Parliament session, we were 25 NDP MPs, and we accomplished pretty much a lot. Pharma care, dental care. We had 2 weeks for federal regulated employees, 2 weeks paid sick days. We had anti-scab law, and we forced the ruling party, the Liberal, to adopt the Canada emergency benefits for during COVID. And I'm not sure if the NDP were not there, if that would be a fact. And good Lord, that workers and self-employed people too. We're talking about self-business people, and we approached that during COVID. Et j'aimerais aussi mentionner que je suis très content de la soirée ce soir. Et puis, je remercie Todd et mes collègues ici. Je prends l'occasion pour parler en français. On va avoir un débat à Alexandria dimanche. Peut-être qu'on va le faire un petit peu plus en français, tant mieux. Je sais que Sarah aussi est bilingue. Donc, je remercie toute l'équipe ici ce soir. Puis, je souhaite que les gens continuent à s'intéresser au débat. On a eu un débat très intelligent. Il n'y a pas eu d'attaque personnelle. J'ai très apprécié des gens de qualité ici. Alors, j'apprécierai votre vote le 28 avril. Merci, Todd.
Thank you, merci. Eric.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you to YourTV and once again to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this debate, and to my fellow candidates for putting your name forward in a good, constructive, civil debate here tonight. The choice in this election is very clear. It could not be more clear. We've had a Liberal government for the last 9.5 years with a dismal performance record. They're trying to run from that record, and we're not going to let them. Life is more expensive, taxes have gone up as services have gotten worse. And at a time we need to be as strong as we possibly can to combat the United States and how their unpredictability is affecting us, we're behind the 8 ball because for years the Liberals dithered and delayed in getting our natural resources, our energy, and our competitiveness in top form. I hope you've learned a lot about our common sense messages and solutions here tonight that can make life more affordable and get our country on a better track. The Liberals are asking for a 4th term, and in my opinion, that's like asking the arsonist to put the fire out. Instead, I'm asking for your support once again as a Conservative candidate in SDNG so we can form a common sense Conservative majority government, one where our country gets lifted up by lower taxes, more efficient government and spending, and being a government you can be proud of both here and around the world. We will repeal the Liberal carbon tax law for good, for real, forever, where we get more homes built and we lower the cost of doing that, where we fix our immigration system, and where we get our economy firing on all cylinders again. None of this will be easy. Making and building Canada was not easy. And with change, there is hope. For the mothers struggling to afford groceries, for the 2 million people using a food bank in this country every month, for the 35-year-old who wants to move out of mom's basement, buy a home and start a family, for seniors choosing between heating and eating, for everyone wonders what happened to the Canada we knew and love, hope and change is on the way. I'm asking for your support and join me in putting Canada first for a change.
Thank you, Eric. Sarah.
Thank you so much, Todd, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce of Cornwall and area for hosting this debate tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate my colleagues, how they've shown up. We've had a respectful and engaging debate here, and this has been a lot of fun, albeit a long night, I'll say that. I am so grateful for the opportunity to present myself as the Liberal candidate for Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. This region is close to my heart. This is my home. We deserve to have representation in government who are under the leadership of the governing party. Now, this is just the beginning, folks. So keep talking to everyone you know. Make sure they know about the new Liberal candidate who is ready to work with determination and grit to get every possible dollar and program available to this region. My pledge to each and every one of you today is this. If you choose to cast your vote for me as your Liberal candidate, I will serve you with integrity, compassion, and dignity. And I will address the issues that impact our region. Merci de soutenir cette campagne. Continuez à vous montrer, à parler à vos voisins, à vos amis et à votre famille. Encouragez-les à voter. L'avenir est good pour SDG. Your support on Election Day means the world to me, and I know that together we can build a vibrant and stronger Canada. The future of Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry is good.
Thank you, Sarah. Gord.
It's been quite the evening. So thanks for paying attention. As Sarah said, these have been great candidates, and you've been a great audience. I really appreciate you listening. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention. I could tell you what's wrong with Canada like some politicians, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you what's right. What's right is we can build an electrical grid and power our future companies, industries, cars, and homes with the clean electrical power which Canada has vast quantities of. I'm not going to be like some other politicians and say, oh, trust me, I've been in power for 9 years, but I've made a mess of things, but we have a new leader and that changes everything. Well, to me, that's like asking the fox to guard the hen house. Instead, consider what I've been saying all night. We have long-standing issues. We've got all these I told you so's, and we need to deal with them before they become a big disaster like the tariff war that we have now, which is caused by an over-reliance upon trade with the Americans. Here's an example right now. This little bit of plastic, this much plastic in the form of microplastics is floating around in your body right now. It's causing inflammation, it's causing possible early Alzheimer's, childhood development problems, neurological problems, reproductive problems. We need to deal with this problem now and not wait for it to blow up in our face like we've done with every other problem. I worked as a consultant for national defense. I apologize, I was a consultant. I worked with a colonel, And he said the following: the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. These are lovely people, but their parties are stuck in a business unusual. They're stuck in a trap of just doing the same old thing. It's not going to get you anywhere. Logically, you need to vote for somebody else. So I want to leave you with a little story. I was up in the North Shore of Quebec, and it was sunny, but it was going to rain. So I looked at everybody else and said, whoa, they're in their shorts and t-shirt. It's going to be great. Well, I had a raincoat with me and I left it behind. Of course, it rained and I got wet. Let's not get wet. Let's stay sunny. Let's vote for a chance to stop business as usual. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the candidates. It was a great night. You have a lot of information to share with our viewers and your constituents. April 28th is Election Day. We want to thank many people for this evening, including the candidates, the questions that were submitted from you, the public. Also, Gabriel Riviere-Reed, our producer, the Chamber of Commerce, in partnership with Your TV, Angela Barrow and Ross Butterworth from the Chamber of Commerce, who are our timekeepers this evening. The questions were great. The volunteers who were here this evening behind the cameras, behind the screens that you don't get to see, helped bring this production to you in your living room this evening. Again, what we can ask of you on Election Day is get out and vote. This flag I stand beside is the reason why we vote. People died for us. Take the opportunity, form your government, be informed. And being informed, you'll see at the end of the TV screen or the end of the production, all the voting dates, including the times, locations, will be listed. Any questions in reference, call the returning office or any of the candidates you see here. Call them for information. On behalf of Todd Lalone and Your TV and the Chamber of Commerce, it was a pleasure. We'll see you next time we're here for a federal election. Thank you.